The attending physician threw the surgical tray across the trauma bay, instruments clattering against tile as he screamed at the limping nurse in the corner. "You're worthless! Get out of my ER!" Everyone watched Maya Torres shrink back, silent, accepting the humiliation like she'd heard it 1,000 times before. The senior staff smirked. The residents exchanged knowing glances. Nobody defended her. Nobody ever did. Then the code black alarm split the air like a knife, and the entire hospital went into lockdown protocol. The lights shifted to emergency red. The main doors sealed with a mechanical thunder that made everyone's blood run cold. And in that moment, as mass casualty announcements flooded the speakers and the attending's face went white with terror, Maya Torres stopped limping. She stood perfectly straight, her eyes no longer soft but hard as combat steel, and said 5 words that would shatter everything they thought they knew. "Everyone step back. I've got this." Before we dive into Maya's story, I want to invite you to stay with me until the very end, because what happens next will leave you speechless. If this story grabs you, hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see just how far Maya's truth can travel. The fluorescent lights of Cascade General Hospital in Silverton Bay had a particular quality that Maya Torres had learned to hate. Harsh, unforgiving, the kind that exposed every flaw and cast shadows in all the wrong places. She'd been working the night shift for 3 months now, ever since she'd started as a registered nurse in the emergency department, and in that time she'd become invisible. Not metaphorically invisible, actually invisible. Doctors looked through her when calling for assistance. Senior nurses assigned her the grunt work, restocking supply closets, running specimens to the lab, cleaning beds, while keeping her away from critical patients. When she spoke up during rounds, her observations were ignored until a resident repeated them 5 minutes later and received praise. Her limp, slight but noticeable from an old injury she never discussed, had become the excuse everyone used to dismiss her entirely. "Torres, we need someone fast for the cardiac arrest in Bay 3, charge nurse Victoria Brennan had said just last week, her voice dripping with artificial concern. "Why don't you handle the discharge paperwork instead? We wouldn't want you to strain yourself." Maya had nodded, swallowed the words she wanted to say, and retreated to the nurse's station while the team rushed past her. She'd watched through the glass as they fumbled with the defibrillator, as the resident placed the electrodes wrong, as precious seconds ticked away. She'd gripped her pen so hard it cracked, but she'd said nothing. Because Maya Torres had learned that sometimes survival meant becoming small. Sometimes it meant letting people underestimate you. Sometimes it meant carrying secrets that would destroy you if you spoke them aloud. Tonight, the ER hummed with the usual chaos. A Friday night in late November, the kind that brought bar fights and car accidents and overdoses in steady rotations. Maya moved through the department like a ghost, her scrubs hanging a bit loose on her frame, her dark hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. She refilled the suture carts in Trauma Bay 1, while Dr. Harrison Chen, the attending physician everyone called the Hammer, barked orders at the surgical residents rotating through the ER. "No, no, no!" Dr. Chen's voice carried across the department. "The subclavian line goes here, you incompetent!" He caught sight of Maya in the corner, organizing supplies with quiet efficiency, and his face darkened. "Torres, what the hell are you doing in my trauma bay?" Maya looked up, her expression carefully neutral. "Restocking the—" "Did I ask for a dissertation?" Dr. Chen strode toward her, his 6-foot frame imposing in the small space. At 47, he carried himself with the arrogance of someone who'd never been truly challenged, never been told no. "You're contaminating my sterile field just by breathing. Get out." "The supplies were depleted from the last case," Maya said quietly, not meeting his eyes. "Protocol says—" "Protocol?" Dr. Chen's laugh was sharp, cruel. "You want to lecture me about protocol? You can barely walk across this department without looking like you're going to collapse. How you even got hired is beyond me." The surgical resident, a young woman named Dr. Sarah Kim, shifted uncomfortably. "Dr. Chen, she's just doing her job. Her job is to stay out of my way." Dr. Chen turned back to Maya, his face inches from hers now. "I've been watching you, Torres. You're slow, you're timid, you second-guess every decision. Last week, you took 15 minutes to start an IV on a stable patient. 15 minutes. Maya's jaw tightened, but she didn't respond. The IV had been difficult. The patient was a former addict with collapsed veins, but she'd gotten it on the second attempt. Dr. Chen hadn't been there to see it. He never was. Nothing to say? Doctor. Chen smiled, the expression ugly. Good, because here's what's going to happen. You're going to finish your shift doing exactly what you're qualified for, cleaning beds and filing paperwork, and then you're going to submit your resignation. This ER needs real nurses, not charity cases. The room had gone quiet. Maya could feel the eyes on her, the residents trying not to stare, the other nurses pretending to be busy, everyone complicit in their silence. She'd been here before, in different forms, different situations. The pattern was always the same. Stand up for yourself, and they'll crush you harder. So Maya did what she always did. She lowered her eyes. She nodded. She picked up her supply cart and turned to leave. That's what I thought, Dr. Chen said to her back. Maya was halfway to the door when Victoria Brennan appeared in the trauma bay entrance, her tablet clutched to her chest. The charge nurse's face was flushed, her eyes bright with something that looked almost like glee. Dr. Chen, I'm going to need Torres reassigned immediately, Victoria said, not even glancing at Maya. We have a VIP family arriving in 30 minutes. City councilman's wife apparently had a fall at a charity gala. I need your A-team ready, not... She waved vaguely in Maya's direction. Already handled, Dr. Chen said. Torres was just leaving. Perfect. Victoria finally looked at Maya, her smile sharp. There's a homeless patient in Bay 7 who needs a wound dressing changed. Should be right at your speed. Maya pushed her cart past them both without a word, her face a careful mask. Behind her, she heard Dr. Chen and Victoria laughing about something, their voices low and conspiratorial. She didn't need to hear the words to know they were about her. Bay 7 was at the far end of the ER, past the waiting room and the triage desk, isolated from the main department. The patient was an older man, maybe 60, with a poorly healing leg ulcer and the hollow eyes of someone who'd been dismissed by the system too many times to count. Hey there, Maya said softly, pulling on fresh gloves. I'm Maya. I'm here to help with your dressing. The man grunted, not quite meeting her eyes. They sent the reject nurse, huh? Figures. Maya paused, her hand still. Why do you say that? I can tell, the man said, his voice rough from too many cigarettes. You got that look, like you're used to being last choice, last thought, like you're just waiting for someone to notice you're even here. Maya resumed her work, carefully cleaning the wound with a gentleness that made the man's expression soften. Maybe I'm exactly where I need to be. That what you tell yourself? He studied her face as she worked. You're better than this, you know. I can see it. Way you move, way you check everything twice. You've done this before. Real stuff, not just dressing changes in some forgotten corner of the ER. Maya's hand stilled for just a fraction of a second before continuing. You're very observant. Not much else to do when you're invisible, the man said. You learn to see the other invisible people. She finished the dressing in silence, her movements precise and efficient. When she was done, she made sure the man had water, adjusted his bed to a more comfortable position, and updated his chart with detailed notes that she knew no one would read. Thank you, the man said as she turned to leave, for treating me like a person. Maya looked back at him, and for just a moment her mask slipped. We all deserve that much. She was disposing of her gloves when the overhead speakers crackled to life. Dr. Chen to the main desk. Dr. Chen to the main desk for VIP arrival. The next 20 minutes passed in a blur of activity that Maya observed from the margins. The councilman's wife arrived in a private ambulance, accompanied by a small entourage that included a personal assistant, a lawyer, and enough attitude to fill the entire trauma bay. The woman had a sprained ankle, painful but hardly life-threatening. But Dr. Chen treated her like royalty, ordering unnecessary scans and calling in specialists for consultations. Maya watched from the nurses' station as resources were diverted, as real emergencies were deprioritized, as the entire ER bent itself around one person's connections and wealth. She made notes in patient charts, restocked supplies, and stayed out of everyone's way. That's when she heard it. a sound so faint that most people would have missed it beneath the general chaos of the ER. A change in breathing pattern from Bay 12, where a young construction worker had been admitted an hour ago with what the triage nurse had labeled minor chest pain. Maya's head came up, her entire body going still in a way that would have looked strange to anyone paying attention. But no one was paying attention. They never did. She moved toward Bay 12 with measured steps, her limp returning as she navigated the crowded corridor. Through the glass, she could see the patient, Miguel Santos, 28 years old, healthy and strong until today, lying on the bed with his eyes closed. His monitor showed stable vitals. His chart indicated he was waiting for a cardiology consult that probably wouldn't come for another hour, given the VIP situation. But his breathing was wrong. Maya slipped into the bay, her movements quiet. She stood at the bedside for 10 seconds, watching the subtle rise and fall of Miguel's chest, the faint bluish tinge creeping into his lips, the way his right hand kept drifting toward his left shoulder. "Mr. Santos," she said softly. "Miguel, can you open your eyes for me?" He did, but the effort seemed to cost him. I'm okay. Just tired." "Your pain," Maya said, her voice calm but focused. "On a scale of 1 to 10, where is it now?" "Maybe 7, 8, he tried to smile. The doctor said it was probably just heartburn. Maya was already moving, her hands flying over the monitor controls, pulling up his EKG from an hour ago and comparing it to the current reading. The change was subtle, so subtle that most nurses would have missed it, would have trusted the initial assessment, would have let this man wait for a consult that would come too late. ST segment elevation, anterior leads, evolving. "Miguel," Maya said, her voice still calm but carrying an edge of command that made his eyes focus on her completely. "You're having a heart attack, right now. I'm going to get you help, but I need you to stay very still and try to stay calm. Can you do that for me?" His face went pale. "What?" "No, the doctor said—" The doctor was wrong. Maya hit the call button, then the code button, her movements smooth and practiced. "You're going to be okay, but we need to move fast." The overhead speakers blared, "Code STEMI, Bay 12, Code STEMI, Bay 12. Maya was already pulling the crash cart closer, establishing a second IV line, pushing the antiplatelet medication that could save Miguel's life if they moved fast enough. Her hands didn't shake. Her breathing stayed even. The limp that had marked her movements all night disappeared entirely as she worked with the precision of someone who'd done this under much worse conditions. Dr. Chen burst into the bay 30 seconds later, his face red with anger. "What the hell do you think you're STEMI, anterior wall," Maya said without looking up, her hands busy with the IV pump. "Symptom onset approximately 90 minutes ago, initially misdiagnosed as GERD. He needs the cath lab now." Dr. Chen stared at the monitor, his anger faltering as he saw the EKG reading. How did you—" "The cath lab," Maya repeated, her voice harder now. "He has minutes, not hours." For a moment, Dr. Chen seemed frozen, caught between his ego and the reality of the situation unfolding in front of him. Then his medical training overrode his pride, and he started barking orders, the same orders Maya had already anticipated, the same medication she'd already prepared. The cardiology team arrived 6 minutes later and rushed Miguel to the catheterization lab. As they wheeled him out, he grabbed Maya's hand, his grip weak but desperate. "Thank you," he whispered. "You saved my life." Maya squeezed his hand gently. "You're going to be fine. They'll take good care of you." When the bay was empty, Maya began the mechanical process of cleaning up, disposing of used supplies, restocking the crash cart, documenting everything in Miguel's chart with the kind of detailed precision that would have impressed any quality review board. "Doctor." Chen stood in the doorway, watching her work. His expression was complicated, part resentment, part confusion, part something that might have been grudging respect. "That was good catch, Torres," he finally said, the words seeming to cost him physical pain. "Quick thinking." Maya didn't look up from the computer. "Just doing my job." "Yeah, well," Dr. Chen shifted his weight. "Maybe I was too harsh earlier. You've got good instincts. I can admit when I'm wrong about someone. Now Maya did look at him, her dark eyes unreadable. Are you wrong about me? The question hung in the air between them, loaded with meaning that Dr. Chen clearly didn't understand. He frowned, his momentary goodwill already evaporating. Don't push it, he said. You made one good call. Doesn't change the fact that you're still the slowest nurse in this department. Doesn't change the fact that you can barely keep up with the pace we need. Understood, Maya said, returning to her charting. Doctor. Chen left without another word, and Maya finished her documentation in silence. She was logging out of the computer when Victoria Brennan appeared, her tablet clutched to her chest like a shield. Impressive save, Victoria said, her tone suggesting it was anything but. Miguel Santos will write you a glowing review, I'm sure. He was misdiagnosed, Maya said quietly. I just corrected it. Victoria's smile was thin. You know, there's a certain protocol to how we do things here, Torres. Chain of command, respecting the attending's initial assessment, not making them look bad by swooping in with dramatic rescues. Maya finally turned to face the charge nurse fully. Would you prefer I let him die? Don't be dramatic, Victoria's eyes narrowed. I'm saying there's a way to handle these situations that doesn't involve making senior staff look incompetent. Dr. Chen is not happy about being shown up by a new nurse who can barely handle basic tasks. I identified a STEMI and initiated appropriate care, Maya said, her voice still level. That's not showing anyone up. That's patient care. That's insubordination. Victoria stepped closer, her voice dropping to a harsh whisper. You're on thin ice, Torres. Dr. Chen wanted you gone before this, and now? Now you've made him look bad in front of the cardiology team, in front of the residents, in front of everyone. Do you have any idea how much power he has in this hospital? Maya said nothing, but something in her posture shifted, an infinitesimal straightening of her spine, a slight tilt of her head that made Victoria take an involuntary step back. I'm just saying, Victoria continued, recovering her composure, maybe it's time to consider whether this is the right fit for you. There are other hospitals, other departments, places where the pace is slower, where your limitations wouldn't be such an issue. My limitations, Maya repeated, the words flat. Your injury, Victoria said, gesturing vaguely at Maya's leg. Whatever happened to you, it's clear you're not fully recovered. Maybe you came back to work too soon. Maybe you need more time, more physical therapy, more... The code black alarm split the air. Every screen in the department flashed red. The overhead lights shifted to emergency protocol, and the mechanical grind of the main entrance doors locking into maximum security protocol echoed through the entire building like the closing of a tomb. Victoria's face went white. What the... The announcement came through every speaker, clear and cold. Code black, mass casualty event, multiple GSWs inbound, all available staff to trauma bays, lockdown protocols in effect. This is not a drill. Repeat, this is not a drill. The ER exploded into chaos. Doctors ran in different directions, shouting contradictory orders. Nurses scrambled to clear beds, to set up trauma bays, to prepare for an influx they weren't equipped to handle. The carefully maintained order of the emergency department dissolved in seconds, revealing the cracks that had always been there, the weaknesses that had been hidden beneath routine and protocol. Dr. Chen emerged from the VIP bay where he'd been schmoozing with the councilman's wife, his face pale. How many casualties? The charge clerk's voice shook as she read from her screen. Initial report says 12, correction, 15. Wait, they're updating 18 GSWs. Multiple critical, ETA 3 minutes. There was an incident at the Naval Base Housing Complex. Active shooter situation. Some are military personnel, some are dependents. Jesus Christ, someone whispered. The main doors were sealed. The ER was an island now, cut off from the rest of the hospital for security reasons until the situation was assessed. Whatever was coming, they had to handle it with the staff currently on shift. 3 attendings, 5 residents, maybe 20 nurses, and support staff. Doctor. Chen started assigning trauma bays, his voice rising with each order. Kim, take Bay 1. Rodriguez, you've got 2. Patel. We need a mass casualty protocol, one of the residents shouted. We can't handle 18 critical GSWs with 3 trauma bays. Then we triage in the hallway, Dr. Chen snapped. We use every available space, every... A sound cut through the chaos. Low, steady, carrying. Everyone stop. It took Maya a moment to realize the voice was hers. The department went quiet. Not completely, but enough that her words could be heard clearly. She stood at the edge of the trauma bay area, still wearing the same loose scrubs, still carrying the same slight frame that everyone had dismissed. But something about her had changed. Something fundamental. She wasn't limping anymore. Dr. Chen's face darkened. Torres, this is not the time. You have 3 trauma bays and 18 critical patients inbound in less than 3 minutes, Maya said, her voice calm and clear and absolutely certain. Your current protocol will result in preventable deaths. We need to reorganize. Now. Who the hell do you think you are? Dr. Chen started toward her. You're a floor nurse who got lucky with one STEMI. You don't give orders in my ER. Maya met his eyes, and Victoria Brennan would later swear that the temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. I'm the person who's about to save your patients, Maya said quietly, so either listen or get out of my way. And that's when they heard it. The roar of engines outside, the thunder of rotors, a sound that didn't belong anywhere near a civilian hospital, the sound of military transport, heavy and unmistakable. Victoria ran to the window, her face pressed against the glass. There are Humvees outside, armed vehicles, and I think that's... Oh my God, that's a helicopter landing on our roof. Dr. Chen's face had gone from red to white. What the hell is happening? Maya was already moving, her limp completely gone, striding toward the main trauma bay with the kind of purposeful efficiency that made people step aside without thinking. She started pulling equipment, organizing supplies, her hands moving in patterns that spoke of muscle memory, formed under conditions none of them could imagine. Torres! Dr. Chen's voice cracked. I gave you an order to stand down. Maya didn't even look at him. Your GSW protocol is outdated by 6 years. You're going to set up for a civilian shooting. This is military personnel injured in a combat-adjacent situation. The treatment protocols are different. The injuries will be different. If you use your standard approach, you'll lose half of them in the first 20 minutes. How the hell would you know? The ambulance bay doors burst open and the first wave arrived. But they weren't in civilian ambulances. They were in military medical transport vehicles. And the personnel bringing the patients in weren't EMTs. They were combat medics in full tactical gear, moving with the precision of people who'd done this under fire. The first patient hit the trauma bay, a young Marine with a chest wound that was pumping blood despite the combat dressing. The medic rattling off vitals did it in the clipped, efficient terminology of battlefield medicine. Echo November, 23 years old, GSW to the right upper chest, possible pneumothorax, estimated blood loss 1000 CCS, last vitals, BP 80/40, pulse 130, RESPs 28. He's been down 8 minutes. The resident froze, her hand shaking as she stared at the wound. Maya stepped forward. He needs a chest tube now. The pneumothorax is tension. It's compressing his heart. You have maybe 90 seconds. The resident looked at Dr. Chen, waiting for orders. Dr. Chen stared at the patient, his face pale, his mouth opening and closing without sound. Maya didn't wait. She pulled on gloves, grabbed the chest tube kit, and had the blade in her hand before anyone could process what was happening. Someone bag him. Now! The combat medic who'd brought the patient in locked eyes with Maya, and something passed between them, a recognition, a confirmation. He started bagging the patient without question, his movements synced with hers like they'd trained together. Maya made the incision with absolute confidence, found the intercostal space, and had the chest tube placed in under 45 seconds. The rush of air and blood confirmed the tension pneumothorax, and the patient's vitals immediately began to stabilize. BP climbing, the medic said. Pulse dropping. Nice work. Dr. Chen finally found his voice. Torres, what the hell do you think you're doing? You're a nurse. You can't perform surgical procedures. Maya was already moving to the next patient, a young woman with an abdominal wound. Then find me a surgeon who can keep up. Until then, watch and learn or get out of my way. More patients flooded in. The chaos was overwhelming. Blood, screams, the acrid smell of gunpowder still on some of the wounded, the organized frenzy of combat medics trying to hand off their patients to a civilian facility that was clearly out of its depth. Victoria grabbed Maya's arm as she passed, her grip desperate. "You need to stop this. You're going to get sued. You're going to lose your license. Maya pulled free with surprising strength. "These people will die if I stop. That lawsuit waiting to happen. Make your choice." She moved through the trauma bays like a force of nature, her hands never hesitating, her voice never rising above a calm, clear command. She identified internal bleeding before the ultrasounds confirmed it. She called for blood products with the kind of timing that suggested she'd done this math in her head 1,000 times before. When a young airman started crashing from uncontrolled hemorrhage, she made the decision to crack his chest right there in the ER. A procedure so extreme, so far beyond standard nursing practice, that Dr. Chen actually grabbed her shoulder. "Torres, stop! You cannot perform a thoracotomy. You're not a surgeon. You're not even—" Maya shrugged off his hand and made the incision. The room went silent except for the sounds of the patient's labored breathing and the steady beep of monitors. Maya's hands moved inside the young man's chest with the confidence of someone who'd done this before, who'd held a human heart in her palms and kept it beating through sheer force of will. She found the hemorrhaging vessel, clamped it, and nodded to one of the surgical residents who'd been standing there with his mouth open. "Now you can close. He'll need the OR for definitive repair, but he'll survive long enough to get there." The resident didn't move. He just stared at her, at the blood on her hands, at the impossibility of what he'd just witnessed. Maya looked past him to one of the combat medics, a hard-faced man in his 40s who'd been watching her with increasing intensity. "You, what's your name?" "Master Sergeant Collins," the man said slowly. "Collins, can you help get this patient to the OR? I trust you more than I trust anyone currently wearing scrubs in this building." Collins's eyes narrowed, studying her face with the kind of scrutiny that suggested he was looking for something specific. "Ma'am, I need to ask you a question. Make it fast. What unit were you with?" The entire trauma bay seemed to hold its breath. Maya met Collins's eyes for a long moment. Then she turned back to her patient, stripping off her bloody gloves. "One that doesn't exist anymore." Before Collins could respond, the radio on his tactical vest crackled to life. "Collins, this is Havoc 6 Actual. What's the status on our wounded?" The sergeant keyed his radio, his eyes never leaving Maya's face. "Havoc 6, this is Collins. We have a fluid situation. Medical personnel are competent. But, sir, we may have a problem." "Define problem, Sergeant." Collins paused, choosing his words carefully. "Sir, I think we've found Wraith." The radio went silent for so long that Collins checked to make sure it was still working. When the voice came back, it was different, harder, more focused. "Say again, Sergeant. Did you say Wraith?" "Affirmative, sir. The civilian nurse treating our wounded. Her movements, her protocols, her—" He looked at Maya, who had gone very still. "Sir, she just performed a field thoracotomy in a civilian ER and saved Airman Chen's life. Without hesitation, without supervision, like she's done it 100 times before." "What's her name?" "She goes by Torres here. Maya Torres." Another long pause. Then, "Detain her, gently, but she doesn't leave that hospital until I get there." Collins lowered his radio slowly. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to come with me." Dr. Chen, who'd been standing in shock through the entire exchange, suddenly found his voice. "Absolutely not. I don't care who you think she is. This woman just performed multiple illegal procedures in my ER. She's violated every protocol, every—" "Sir." Collins' voice carried the weight of 20 years of military service. "With all due respect, you need to shut up, right now." "How dare you!" The sound of boots on the stairs cut Dr. Chen off mid-sentence. Heavy, synchronized, moving fast. The kind of footsteps that suggested a lot of people in tactical gear, all heading for the same destination. The trauma bay doors burst open and 8 operators in full kit poured in, their weapons lowered but ready, their movements precise and professional. They cleared the room with practiced efficiency, and then a man stepped through the door who made everyone else look small. He was 6'4", built like a linebacker, with graying hair cut high and tight, and eyes that had seen things that would break most people. The insignia on his uniform marked him as a Navy commander, but the way he carried himself suggested he was so far beyond rank that it hardly mattered. Those eyes scanned the trauma bay, passed over the staff, the wounded, the chaos, and locked onto Maya. She stood frozen in the center of the room, still holding a blood-soaked gauze pad, her scrubs covered in evidence of the last 15 minutes of organized violence. For the first time since the Code Black had started, she looked uncertain. The commander crossed the room in 4 strides. He stopped 3 feet from her, his expression unreadable. Then he spoke one word that would shatter everything the hospital staff thought they knew about the quiet, limping nurse they'd spent 3 months dismissing. Wraith. Maya Torres didn't move, didn't speak. For 3 heartbeats that felt like hours, she simply stared at the commander with an expression that cycled through shock, recognition, and something that looked almost like grief before settling into carefully controlled neutrality. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said finally, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands as she set down the gauze. "My name is Maya Torres. I'm a registered nurse at Cascade General." The commander's eyes never left hers. "Your real name is Maya Cross, Captain Maya Cross, formerly attached to Naval Special Warfare Development Group. You were declared killed in action 18 months ago during a classified operation in the Helmand province. Your body was never recovered. Your teammates held a memorial service with an empty casket." The trauma bay had gone completely silent. Even the monitors seemed to beep more quietly, as if the machines themselves were holding their breath. "Doctor," Chen found his voice first, "this is insane. Torres has been working here for 3 months. She's a civilian nurse with a limp and barely adequate skills. She's not some... She just performed a field thoracotomy without supervision," Collins interrupted, his voice hard. "She diagnosed and treated a tension pneumothorax in under a minute. She organized a mass casualty response better than most military field hospitals. Sir, with all due respect, she's exactly some special operations combat medic." Victoria Brennan backed toward the door, her tablet clutched to her chest like a shield. "This is impossible. We ran background checks. We verified her nursing license. She's been here for months, just being ordinary." "Hiding," the commander corrected, still watching Maya. "Isn't that right, Captain?" Maya's jaw tightened. "I need to get back to my patients." She tried to move past him, but the commander shifted his weight, blocking her path without touching her. "Your patients are stable. Master Sergeant Collins and his team can handle the ongoing care. You and I need to have a conversation." "I don't work for you anymore," Maya said quietly. "I don't work for anyone anymore. I'm a civilian. You have no authority over me." "That's where you're wrong." The commander pulled a folder from inside his tactical vest, flipped it open to show her the top page. Maya's face went pale as she recognized the documents. Official, sealed, marked with clearance levels that most people would never see in their lives. "You're still on active duty status, Captain Cross. You were never formally discharged. You were listed as MIA, then KIA, but those designations were never finalized, which means technically you've been AWOL for the last 18 months. "That's not possible," Maya whispered. "I sent the discharge paperwork before the operation went sideways." The commander's voice dropped lower, gentler. "Before your entire team was compromised? Before you had to choose between following orders and saving civilian lives?" Maya's eyes closed briefly, and when they opened again, something fundamental had shifted in her expression. The careful neutrality was gone, replaced by a weariness that seemed to age her 10 years in an instant. "What do you want, Commander Reeves?" So she did know him. Dr. Chen and Victoria exchanged confused glances, but neither dared to speak. Commander Reeves gestured toward the door. "A conversation, in private, 5 minutes." "And if I refuse?" "Then I have 8 operators in this room who will escort you to a secure location for debriefing. But I'd rather not do it that way, Maya. You've earned better than that." Maya looked around the trauma bay, at the wounded soldiers she'd stabilized, at the shocked civilian staff, at Collins, who was watching the entire exchange with the fascination of someone witnessing a legend come to life. Her gaze landed last on Dr. Chen, whose face had shifted from anger to confusion to something that might have been fear. "You wanted me gone anyway," she said to him, her voice empty. "Congratulations," You're about to get your wish. She walked toward the door without waiting for a response. Commander Reeves followed, along with two of his operators, leaving the rest of the team to secure the trauma bay and assist with the remaining casualties. They moved through the locked-down ER in silence, past the gawking staff and the security personnel who took one look at Reeves's uniform and decided not to ask questions. He led her to a small conference room near the administrative offices, gestured for the operators to wait outside, and closed the door behind them. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Reeves studied her face like he was comparing it to a memory, looking for the woman he'd known beneath the civilian disguise. "You look different," he said finally. "The limp, the weight loss, the way you carry yourself. If Collins hadn't recognized your medical protocols, I'm not sure I would have known you." That was the point. Maya leaned against the conference table, her arms crossed. "I needed to disappear completely." "Why?" "You know why." Her voice was flat, dead. "You read the after-action reports. You know what happened in Helmand. You know what I did." Reeves pulled out a chair and sat down, his movements deliberate. "I know what the official reports say. I know that Operation Sandstorm was compromised. I know that your team was pinned down in a village with 43 civilians, including 17 children. I know that you were ordered to extract and leave the civilians to minimize mission compromise. And I know that you refused that order." Maya's hands tightened on her arms, her knuckles going white. "I court-martialed myself. I violated direct orders from JSOC. I put my team at risk. You saved 43 innocent lives," Reeves interrupted. "You held position for 6 hours under heavy fire. You performed field medicine on 3 critically wounded children with supplies meant for military personnel. You coordinated an evacuation that should have been impossible. And when your position was finally overrun, you covered your team's retreat long enough for them to get the civilians out. And then I got blown to hell, and they left me behind," Maya finished, her voice hollow. "Which is exactly what should have happened. I made my choice. I accepted the consequences. Except you didn't die." Reeves leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. "You survived. You made your way to a Pakistani field hospital. You spent 4 months recovering in a facility that had no idea who you really were, and then you disappeared into the civilian world instead of coming home." Maya finally met his eyes. "There was nothing to come home to. My team thought I was dead. My family had already buried an empty casket. The Navy had already written me off as KIA in a classified operation that officially never happened. What was I supposed to do? Show up at headquarters and say, 'Surprise, I survived my own insubordination'? Yes." The word was simple, direct. "That's exactly what you should have done, because your team never stopped looking for you, Maya, even after the official search was called off, even after the memorial service. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez spent his own money hiring private investigators. Lieutenant Chen flew to Pakistan 3 times trying to find any trace of you. They knew. They believed you were alive somewhere." Maya's mask cracked, just for a second, and Reeves saw the pain underneath. "I couldn't face them. I couldn't face anyone. I made a choice that got me labeled a traitor by command. I violated every protocol, every protocol that would have resulted in the massacre of 43 innocent people," Reeves said, his voice hard now. "Do you know what happened after Sandstorm, Maya? Do you know what the fallout was?" She shook her head slowly. "The intelligence you gathered during those 6 hours, the enemy positions, the command structure, the supply lines, it led to the largest Taliban disruption in that region in 5 years. The civilians you saved? 3 of them were family members of a local tribal leader who flipped his allegiance because you risked your life for his children. That one decision shifted the entire dynamic of the province. You didn't just save lives, Captain. You changed the strategic landscape." Maya stared at him, her expression unreadable. "The orders said—" "The orders were wrong." Reeves stood up, moving to the window that overlooked the ER below. "And the people who gave those orders know it now. You were recommended for the Navy Cross, Maya. Maya, did you know that? Your team wrote you up. The citation is sitting in a classified file waiting for you to come back and claim it. I don't want a medal for disobeying orders." "Then what do you want?" Reeves turned back to face her. "To hide in a second-rate ER where they treat you like you're incompetent? To pretend you're not one of the most skilled combat medics the Navy has ever produced? To let them waste your talents on bed changes and discharge paperwork. I want to be left alone, Maya said, but there was no conviction in her voice. Reeves pulled out his phone, scrolled through something, and turned the screen to face her. That young Marine in Trauma Bay 1, the one with the chest wound. His name is Lance Corporal David Martinez. He's 23 years old. He has a wife and a 6-month-old daughter. If you hadn't been here tonight, if you hadn't stepped up when you did, he'd be dead right now. He scrolled to another photo. This is Airman First Class Sarah Chen, the one you did the emergency thoracotomy on. She's the first person in her family to join the military. Her parents immigrated from Taiwan when she was 5. She wants to be a pilot. Without you, she never would have made it out of this ER. Stop, Maya whispered. Why? Reeves kept going, showing her more photos, more names, more lives. These are the people you saved tonight, Maya. Not because you had to, not because you were following orders, but because when everyone else froze, when the doctors panicked and the protocols failed, you stepped up and did what you were trained to do. You were extraordinary, just like you've always been. Maya's hands were shaking now, her carefully constructed walls crumbling. I can't go back. I can't be that person anymore. I'm broken, Commander. Whatever I was in Helmand, whatever skills I had, I lost them when I lost my team. You didn't lose anything. Reeves's voice was gentle now. You're standing here after performing battlefield medicine in a civilian ER without breaking a sweat. You organized a mass casualty response that would make most military facilities jealous. You saved lives that everyone else had written off. That's not broken, Maya. That's exactly who you've always been. Before Maya could respond, the door burst open. One of the operators stuck his head in, his face urgent. Commander, we have a situation. One of the wounded is crashing, internal bleeding they missed in the initial triage. The civilian staff doesn't know how to handle it. Reeves looked at Maya. Your call, Captain. She was already moving, pushing past the operator and running toward the trauma bay, her limp completely gone as adrenaline overrode whatever injury had caused it. Reeves followed, along with the security team, arriving just in time to see Maya shouldering her way past Dr. Chen and the frozen surgical residents. The patient was a Navy corpsman, ironic and terrible in equal measure, with worsening vital signs and a distended abdomen that screamed internal hemorrhage. The ultrasound showed free fluid in the peritoneum, but the attending surgeon was on the other side of the hospital dealing with the VIP patient's emergency ankle sprain. He needs surgery now, the junior resident stammered, her hands shaking. But we can't get him to the OR. The hospital is still on lockdown, and Dr. Morrison won't leave the VIP. Then we do it here, Maya said, her voice calm and absolute. Dr. Chen grabbed her arm, his face purple with rage. Absolutely not. You are not performing exploratory surgery in my ER. I don't care who this commander says you are. You don't have privileges. You don't have supervision. You don't have... Maya turned to look at him, and whatever he saw in her eyes made him release her arm and take a step back. This corpsman's name is Petty Officer 2nd Class Marcus Williams, she said quietly. He's been in the Navy for 7 years. He survived 2 deployments to Afghanistan and 1 to Syria. He saved 14 lives in the field using the same skills I'm about to use to save his. And if you try to stop me, Commander, I will have you removed from this ER by armed military personnel. Your choice. Dr. Chen opened his mouth, closed it, looked at Commander Reeves for support. The commander just crossed his arms and waited. You're insane, Dr. Chen finally said, but he stepped back. Maya was already scrubbing, already preparing, her movements falling into the familiar rhythm of battlefield medicine. She didn't have an OR. She didn't have proper surgical support. She had a trauma bay, basic instruments, and the same skills that had kept her team alive through 6 hours of hell in Helmand Province. It would have to be enough. I need 2 units of O-negative blood, a major surgery tray, and someone who won't pass out at the sight of abdominal organs, she said, her voice carrying the command authority she'd spent 3 months suppressing. Collins, you've done combat field surgery before? Yes, ma'am, the master sergeant said, already moving to scrub in. Good. You're my second set of hands. She looked at the residents who were watching with pale faces. The rest of you can observe and learn, or you can leave. But if you stay, you follow my orders without question. Understood? They nodded, too shocked to do anything else. Maya made the first incision with steady hands, opening the corpsman's abdomen to reveal the source of the bleeding. A lacerated liver, probably from a bullet fragment that the initial imaging had missed. Blood pooled in the abdominal cavity, and she could see the torn vessel pulsing with each heartbeat. "Suction," she said, and Collins was already there with it. "I need to pack this and get proximal control before he bleeds out." Her hands moved inside the corpsman's body with the confidence of someone who'd done this dozens of times under much worse conditions. She packed the wound, clamped the bleeding vessel, and began the delicate work of repair while the entire ER watched in silence. Victoria Brennan stood at the edge of the trauma bay, her face pale. She pulled out her phone with shaking hands and made a call, speaking in low, urgent tones. Maya didn't need to hear the words to know who she was calling. Hospital administration, probably legal, definitely someone who would make this situation infinitely more complicated. But that was a problem for later. Right now there was only the surgery, the patient, the steady rhythm of repair and restoration that Maya's hands remembered even if her mind had tried to forget. 27 minutes later, the bleeding was controlled, the liver was repaired as well as could be managed in an ER, and Petty Officer Williams's vitals had stabilized enough for transport to a proper OR for closure. Maya stepped back from the table, her scrubs soaked with blood, her hands steady despite the exhaustion that was starting to creep in around the edges. He'll need monitoring, but he should make it. Get him to the OR for formal closure and recovery. The surgical residents just stared at her, their textbook knowledge completely inadequate to process what they'd just witnessed. Collins pulled off his gloves slowly, studying Maya's face. "That was remarkable, ma'am. I've seen a lot of field surgery, but that was—" He shook his head. "They said you were the best. I didn't believe half the stories. Now I believe all of them." "It was just basic damage control," Maya said, but her voice was tired. "No," Commander Reeves said from the doorway. "It was exceptional medicine performed under impossible conditions. It was exactly what we trained you to do. It was exactly why we need you back." Maya turned to face him, and that's when she saw the other people who'd arrived during the surgery. Hospital administrators in expensive suits, a woman in a lawyer's outfit with a briefcase, 2 uniformed police officers, and behind them all, a man in a naval officer's uniform with captain's bars and an expression that suggested he was very used to getting his way. The naval captain stepped forward, his eyes cold as they assessed Maya. "Captain Maya Cross. Or should I call you Nurse Torres? I'm Captain Richard Vance, Naval Special Warfare Command. We need to have a very serious conversation about your status, your location for the last 18 months, and the considerable security breach your desertion represents." Commander Reeves moved to intercept him. "Captain Vance, this is neither the time nor the place. With respect, Commander, you don't have authority in this matter." Vance's voice was clipped, professional, and utterly unsympathetic. "Captain Cross went AWOL from a classified unit. She possesses classified information. She disappeared into the civilian sector without authorization. That's not just a personnel issue. It's a national security issue." Maya felt the walls closing in. This was the nightmare scenario she'd been running from for 18 months. The confrontation she'd known was inevitable if anyone ever connected Maya Torres to Captain Maya Cross. "I have rights," she said quietly. "I'm a civilian now. You can't just—" "You're not a civilian," Vance interrupted. "You're active-duty military who abandoned her post. And these civilians?" He gestured to the hospital administrators who were watching the exchange with barely concealed alarm. "They employed someone under false pretenses. They allowed an AWOL service member to practice medicine without proper disclosure. They're complicit in harboring a deserter." Dr. Chen's face had gone from purple to gray. "We didn't know. We had no idea she was—" "Ignorance isn't a defense," Vance said. "This hospital is now part of a military investigation." The lead administrator, a thin man in his 60s named Gerald Hoskins, stepped forward. "Now wait just a minute. This is a civilian facility. You can't just storm in here and— Actually, I can." Vance pulled out his own folder, this one stamped with official seals that made Hoskins' face go pale. "Under the Uniform Code of Military Justice and federal statutes regarding classified personnel, I have full authority to detain Captain Cross and investigate any civilian entities that may have aided in her disappearance. That includes this hospital, its staff, and its administration." Maya felt something inside her break. She'd known this was coming, had prepared for it in her mind 1,000 times, but the reality was still crushing. All the months of hiding, all the careful construction of her civilian identity, all the hope that maybe she could just disappear and live a quiet life. It was all falling apart in real time. "I'll go with you," she said, her voice empty. "Just leave the hospital alone. They didn't know anything. They're innocent in this." Vance's smile was sharp. "That's not how this works, Captain. There will be a full investigation. There will be consequences. For everyone involved." "That's enough," Commander Reeves said, his voice carrying an edge that made even Vance pause. "You want to throw your weight around, Captain? Fine. But you're going to do it through proper channels with proper oversight, not in a civilian ER in front of witnesses." "I don't take orders from you, Commander." "No, but you take them from Admiral Morrison." Reeves pulled out his own phone, dialed a number, and put it on speaker. "And I suspect he's going to be very interested in how you're handling the recovery of one of DevGru's most decorated combat medics." The phone rang twice before a gravelly voice answered. "Reeves, this better be important." "Admiral, I have Captain Richard Vance from NSW Command here. He's threatening to arrest Captain Maya Cross in the middle of a civilian ER where she just saved the lives of 6 of our people. Thought you might want to weigh in." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Then, "Put Vance on." Vance's jaw tightened, but he took the phone. "Admiral Morrison, sir. I'm just following protocol for—" Whatever Admiral Morrison said next, it wasn't audible to anyone else. But Vance's face went from confident to carefully controlled in about 5 seconds. The conversation lasted less than a minute, and when Vance handed the phone back to Reeves, his expression was murderous. "The Admiral wants Captain Cross transported to Naval Base Point Loma for debriefing," Vance said, his voice tight. "Under escort, but not under arrest. Pending review of her status and the circumstances of her disappearance." "Much more reasonable," Reeves said mildly. He looked at Maya. "You okay with that?" She nodded slowly, too tired to fight anymore. "Do I have a choice?" "There's always a choice," Reeves said. "But I think the Admiral's offer is fair. You'll get a chance to tell your story, to explain what happened, to have your service recognized instead of buried." "And the hospital?" Maya looked at Hoskins and Dr. Chen and Victoria, all of whom were watching the exchange with varying degrees of panic and confusion. "I'll make sure they understand you falsified your credentials without their knowledge," Vance said, though he didn't sound happy about it. "As far as they knew, you were just a civilian nurse with a questionable work ethic." Dr. Chen made a strangled sound that might have been protest or agreement. Maya pulled off her bloody gloves, dropped them in the biohazard bin, and walked toward the door. She paused next to Dr. Chen, looked him directly in the eyes, and said quietly, "For what it's worth, Doctor, every time you told me I wasn't good enough, every time you made me feel small and incompetent, every time you humiliated me in front of the staff, I knew exactly what I was capable of. I just chose to let you believe your own delusions, because sometimes the strongest thing you can do is let small people feel big." She walked past him without waiting for a response, flanked by Commander Reeves and 2 armed operators, leaving behind a trauma bay full of shocked faces and unanswered questions. They were halfway through the ER when the doors from the waiting room burst open and a woman in her 30s ran in, her face streaked with tears. "Where's my husband? Where's Marcus? They told me he was shot. They told me he was critical." Maya stopped walking. Reeves put a hand on her shoulder, but she shrugged it off gently and turned to face the woman. "Mrs. Williams?" Maya's voice was soft. The woman's eyes found her, locked onto the blood on her scrubs. Did you? Is he? "Your husband is stable," Maya said, crossing the distance between them. "He had internal bleeding that we missed in the initial assessment, but we caught it in time. He's headed to surgery now for formal closure and recovery. He's going to be okay." Mrs. Williams' legs seemed to give out, and Maya caught her, easing her into a nearby chair. The woman sobbed into her hands, her whole body shaking with relief and terror and exhaustion. "He's really okay?" she whispered. "You're sure?" "I operated on him myself," Maya said. "I give you my word. He's going to make it home to you." Mrs. Williams looked up at her, taking in the blood, the exhaustion, the quiet competence. Who are you? Maya smiled, sad and tired. Just someone who understands what it means to fight for the people you love. She stood, stepped back, and let Reeves guide her toward the exit. Behind her, she could hear Dr. Chen saying something to the administrators, Victoria arguing about protocols and liability, the residents talking in hushed, awed tones about the surgery they'd witnessed. The last thing she heard before the doors closed behind her was one of the surgical residents saying, "Did you see her hands?" She didn't hesitate once, not once. It was like watching someone perform a symphony. Outside, a black SUV was waiting, along with two more military vehicles forming a security convoy. The night air was cold, carrying the salt smell of the ocean that was just a few miles away. Maya stood on the sidewalk for a moment, breathing it in, feeling the weight of her false identity falling away like shed skin. "You okay?" Reeves asked quietly. "I don't know," Maya admitted. "Ask me again when I'm not covered in someone else's blood." She was about to get in the SUV when her phone buzzed in her pocket. The cheap prepaid phone she'd bought with cash, the one registered to Maya Torres, the one that should have been completely disconnected from her old life. The text message was from an unknown number. "The crew wants to see Wraith tomorrow, 0800, Coronado. Don't make us come find you again." Maya stared at the message for a long moment, then looked up at Reeves. "Did you tell my old team I was alive?" His expression was carefully neutral. "The Admiral might have mentioned to Staff Sergeant Rodriguez that we'd located a person of interest. What Rodriguez does with that information is his own business. He's going to be so pissed at me." Probably," Reeves agreed. "But he's also been looking for you for 18 months. He deserves to know you're alive. They all do." Maya climbed into the SUV, her mind spinning with the impossibility of facing the people she'd left behind, the teammates who'd mourned her, the brothers and sisters in arms who'd thought she was dead. The convoy pulled away from Cascade General Hospital, leaving behind the ER that had been Maya Torres's hiding place and sanctuary and prison all at once. She watched through the tinted windows as the building receded into the distance, saw the lights of the trauma bays still burning bright, saw the life she'd built for 3 months disappearing like smoke. Reeves sat across from her in the back of the SUV, his phone out as he typed messages to people Maya couldn't see. After a moment, he looked up and studied her face. "You know what the hardest part of all this is going to be?" he asked. "Facing my team?" Maya guessed. "Explaining why I let them think I was dead? Justifying 18 months of hiding?" "No." Reeves's expression softened slightly. "The hardest part is going to be accepting that you were never the person they thought you were in that ER. You were never slow or incompetent or barely adequate. You were always exceptional. You just convinced yourself that hiding that was the same as protecting yourself." Maya looked away, watching the streetlights blur past. "Maybe I was protecting them. Maybe everyone is safer if people like me just disappear." "People like you?" Reeves leaned forward. "You mean the ones who save lives? The ones who run toward danger when everyone else runs away? The ones who perform emergency surgery in a civilian ER because that's what the situation demands?" "Yeah, Maya. The world is definitely safer without people like that." She didn't respond, but something in her chest loosened slightly, some knot of shame and fear that had been pulled tight for so long it felt permanent. They drove in silence for another 10 minutes before Reeves's phone buzzed. He read the message, and his expression shifted to something grim. "What?" Maya asked. "Hospital administration just filed a formal complaint," he said, reading from his screen. "They're claiming you practiced medicine without proper credentials, performed unauthorized procedures, and endangered patients through reckless behavior. They're demanding a full investigation and threatening legal action." Maya felt her stomach drop. Of course they are. Can't have a nurse showing up there attending physicians. Bad for the hierarchy. "There's more." Reeves scrolled through the message. "Dr. Chen is claiming you assaulted him, said you physically intimidated him in the trauma bay. Victoria Brennan is backing him up, says you were unstable and aggressive. They're building a case to ensure you never work in healthcare again." "Let them," Maya said, her voice hollow. "I'm probably headed for a court-martial anyway. What's one more pile of consequences?" "Actually," Reeves's phone buzzed again. and this time his expression shifted to something that might have been satisfaction. Interesting. The hospital's CEO, Gerald Hoskins, just sent a separate message to the Admiral. Apparently he's requesting an immediate meeting. Says there are mitigating circumstances that need to be discussed before any formal complaints move forward. What kind of mitigating circumstances? Doesn't say. Reeves typed a quick response. But my guess? Someone just realized that publicly attacking the woman who saved 6 military lives in their ER might not play well in the court of public opinion, especially once the media gets hold of the story. Maya's hands clenched in her lap. I don't want this to become a media circus. I don't want my face plastered across news channels. I just want— What do you want, Maya? Reeves interrupted, his voice gentle but firm. Because you keep saying what you don't want, but you never say what you do want. So tell me, right now, what do you actually want from all this? Maya stared at him, the question hitting harder than any accusation or threat. What did she want? She'd spent 18 months running, hiding, trying to become someone small and forgettable. She'd convinced herself that disappearing was the same as healing, that hiding was the same as peace. But tonight, in that trauma bay, when the alarms were screaming and people were dying and everyone else had frozen, she'd felt alive for the first time since Helmand. She'd felt the clarity of purpose, the absolute certainty of doing exactly what she was meant to do. And she'd felt the crushing weight of knowing that the life she'd built as Maya Torres was a lie. I want— she started, then stopped, the words catching in her throat. The SUV's radio crackled to life before she could finish. Echo 1, this is base. We have an urgent situation developing. Multiple casualties reported at Coronado Naval Station. Explosion in the training facility. Mass casualty protocols in effect. All available medical personnel are being activated. Reeves grabbed the radio. Base, this is Echo 1. What's the ETA on military medical response? Delayed, sir. The base medical facility is at capacity with the earlier shooting victims. They're calling in civilian support, but ETA is 20 to 30 minutes minimum. We're 10 minutes out, Reeves said. He looked at Maya, and she could see the question in his eyes, even before he asked it. Your call, Captain. We can take you straight to Point Loma for debriefing like planned, or I can do my job, Maya finished. She felt something shift inside her, some final wall crumbling. Take me to Coronado. Those are my people bleeding out. I'm not running anymore. Reeves smiled, and it transformed his entire face. Echo 1 to base. Redirect to Coronado Naval Station. We have Captain Maya Cross responding. Alert the facility that Wraith is coming home. The SUV accelerated, the convoy falling into tight formation as they headed for the base. Maya watched the city blur past, feeling the familiar pre-combat clarity settling over her mind. Her hands stopped shaking. Her breathing evened out. The limp that had defined Maya Torres for 3 months disappeared entirely as Captain Maya Cross rose to the surface like a diver breaking through dark water into light. And somewhere in the back of her mind, she heard the echo of her old team's call sign, the name they'd given her for her ability to appear out of nowhere when things got desperate, to save lives when death seemed certain, to be exactly what was needed, exactly when it was impossible. Wraith. The name had felt like a burden for 18 months, a reminder of everything she'd lost and everyone she'd abandoned. Tonight, for the first time, it felt like coming home. The gates of Coronado Naval Station opened before the convoy reached them, security already briefed on their arrival. Maya could see the smoke rising from the training facility 300 yards inland, thick, black, chemical-laden. The kind of smoke that meant structural damage, possibly secondary explosions, definitely more casualties than the initial report suggested. The SUV hadn't fully stopped before Maya was out, her eyes scanning the scene with the practiced assessment of someone who'd triaged mass casualties in war zones. The training facility's east wing was partially collapsed, support beams jutting at wrong angles through clouds of dust and smoke. Emergency personnel swarmed the perimeter, but their movements were disorganized, chaotic, no command structure, no clear triage protocols. They were drowning and didn't even know it yet. Commander Reeves appeared at her shoulder, already on his radio coordinating with base security. A Navy corpsman ran up to them, his face streaked with soot and blood that probably wasn't his own. Sir, we have at least 23 casualties confirmed, possibly more still trapped in the structure. The base medical facility is maxed out. We've got wounded scattered across 3 different staging areas with no central coordination. The senior medical officer on site is overwhelmed and— Where? Maya interrupted. The corpsman blinked at her. Ma'am? Where's your senior medical officer? Near the east staging area, but ma'am, I don't think— Maya was already moving, her stride long and purposeful. She heard Reeves following, barking orders into his radio, but her focus had narrowed to the tactical reality in front of her. 23 confirmed casualties meant at least 30 total. 3 staging areas meant diluted resources and duplicated efforts. No central coordination meant people dying from preventable complications while medics worked at cross purposes. The chaos was familiar. The solution was automatic. The east staging area was a nightmare of good intentions and poor execution. Wounded sailors and Marines were laid out on tarps and stretchers in no particular order. Some were being treated by multiple corpsmen simultaneously while others lay unattended. Medical supplies were scattered across the ground, half-opened and disorganized. A Navy lieutenant with medical insignia stood in the center of it all, shouting contradictory orders while his face reflected the knowledge that he was losing control. Maya didn't introduce herself. She didn't ask permission. She simply raised her voice with the command authority that 18 months of hiding hadn't entirely erased. Everyone stop. Right now. The staging area went quiet, dozens of faces turning toward her in confusion and irritation. The lieutenant's face flushed red. Who the hell are you? This is a restricted— Lieutenant, you have 3 minutes to save lives you're currently losing through poor triage protocols, Maya said, her voice carrying across the staging area. You can waste those minutes asking who I am, or you can listen and let me help you organize this chaos before more people die. Your choice. The lieutenant's mouth opened, closed. He looked past Maya to Commander Reeves, who'd caught up and was standing with his arms crossed, making no move to intervene. She's with me, Reeves said simply. I'd listen if I were you. Maya didn't wait for the lieutenant's decision. She moved into the staging area, her eyes cataloging injuries with brutal efficiency. You, she pointed to a corpsman kneeling next to a sailor with a sucking chest wound. Get me a hemostatic dressing and start bagging him. That's a tension pneumothorax waiting to happen. The corpsman hesitated only a second before following her orders. Maya kept moving, her hands already pulling on gloves from a nearby supply kit. Red tags on anyone with immediate life threats. Uncontrolled hemorrhage, airway compromise, tension pneumo. Yellow tags for urgent but stable. Green for walking wounded. Black tags for expectant. We're doing start triage, and we're doing it fast. Corpsman Johnson. She read the name tape of a young woman frozen in place. You're in charge of tracking yellow tags. Move them to the west side of the staging area. How did you know my name? Johnson whispered. Your name tape? Focus. Maya was already kneeling next to a Marine whose left leg was partially severed below the knee, blood pooling despite the tourniquet that had been placed too loose and too low. This tourniquet is wrong. It needs to be higher, tighter, or he bleeds out in the next 10 minutes. She repositioned the tourniquet with quick, practiced movements, the Marine's scream cutting through the smoky air. But his bleeding slowed to a trickle, and his color started to improve almost immediately. The lieutenant finally found his voice. You can't just take over my— Your staging area has 17 immediate casualties, 8 urgent, and 3 walking wounded who are taking up resources while critical patients wait, Maya said, without looking at him. You've got 2 corpsmen working on 1 yellow tag while a red tag over there is developing shock. Your supply distribution is scattered, your documentation is non-existent, and you're about to lose at least 3 patients who should survive. So either help me fix this or get out of my way, Lieutenant. She stood, locking eyes with him. The challenge was clear, absolute. The lieutenant's jaw worked for a moment, then quietly, What do you need? Better supply organization, a documentation corpsman to track patient status and transport priorities, and someone to coordinate with the other staging areas so we're not duplicating efforts. Maya turned to survey the scene. And we need to know if there are still people trapped in that building. As if in answer, an explosion rocked the training facility's west wing. Secondary detonation, probably a fuel line or stored ammunition cooking off from the heat. Debris rained down, and fresh screams echoed from somewhere inside the partially collapsed structure. We've got people still in there, a firefighter shouted, running toward the staging area. Structural team says the building is unstable, but we've got voice contact with at least 4 trapped personnel in the basement level. They've got injuries. They need medical support now. The building could come down any second, someone else called out. Fire department says it's too dangerous to send anyone in. Maya looked at the smoking structure, calculating angles and risks and the odds of pulling wounded from a building that was actively trying to kill everyone inside it. This was the decision point. This was where good people made terrible choices, or where heroes got themselves killed for nothing, or where someone with the right training and the wrong amount of experience walked into the nightmare because they knew how to walk back out. I need turnout gear and a radio, Maya said. Reeves grabbed her arm. Absolutely not, we just got you back. I'm not sending you into a collapsing building. You're not sending me anywhere, Maya said, meeting his eyes. I'm volunteering. Those 4 people in there? They're Navy, they're mine, and no one else here has combat extraction training. The structure is compromised. Even with your training, 4 lives, Commander. Maya pulled free of his grip. We don't leave people behind. You taught me that. She was moving toward the fire suppression team before he could argue further, already stripping off her blood-soaked scrubs to reveal the tank top underneath. A firefighter sized her up skeptically as she approached. You're not going in there, he said flatly. Structural engineers red-tagged the whole east section. Another collapse is imminent. Then we better move fast. Maya pulled on the turnout coat he was holding, cinched it tight. Where's the access point? There isn't one. The main stairwell collapsed. There's a ventilation shaft that might reach the basement, but it's a straight drop with no safety equipment. And even if you got down, you'd have to navigate through a structure that could pancake on you any second. So it's possible, Maya said. The firefighter stared at her like she was insane. Lady, possible and survivable are 2 very different things. I've done worse. Maya held out her hand. Radio, rope if you have it, and I need someone to mark the evacuation route with chem lights so I can find my way back in the dark. This is insane, the firefighter muttered, but he was already pulling equipment from his truck. You're going to get yourself killed. Probably not today. Maya clipped the radio to her belt, tested the rope harness. I'm notoriously hard to kill. Reeves appeared again, this time with 2 of his operators. If you're doing this, you're not doing it alone. Master Chief Garrett has urban extraction training. He goes with you. The operator Reeves indicated was a broad-shouldered man in his 40s with the calm eyes of someone who'd seen enough to not be impressed by danger anymore. He nodded to Maya once, no words needed. 2 is better than 1, Maya acknowledged. Let's move. They approached the ventilation shaft together, a 3-foot-wide opening that dropped straight down into darkness, filled with smoke and the ominous creaking of stressed metal. Garrett went first, rappelling down with practiced efficiency. Maya followed, the rope burning through her gloved hands as she descended into heat and darkness. The basement level was worse than she'd imagined. The explosion had collapsed part of the ceiling, creating a maze of twisted metal and concrete where hallways used to be. Emergency lighting flickered, casting moving shadows that made every shape look threatening. And somewhere in this chaos were 4 people who'd already survived one disaster and were running out of time before the second one killed them. This is Wraith, Maya said into her radio, using her old call sign automatically. We're at basement level, searching for survivors now. Wraith, this is Command, Reeves's voice crackled back. You have 15 minutes maximum before structural integrity fails completely. Find them fast and get out. Garrett was already moving, following the sound of voices calling for help through the wreckage. Maya followed, her eyes adjusting to the dim light, her hands touching walls and beams to test their stability. The training kicked in, every movement calculated, every breath measured, awareness expanding to encompass not just the immediate space, but the entire structure's failing integrity. They found the first survivor wedged under a collapsed beam, a young ensign with a crushed leg and the wide-eyed look of someone in shock. Garrett began working to free her while Maya moved deeper into the wreckage, following the sound of labored breathing. The second survivor was worse, a petty officer with a penetrating chest wound and a makeshift pressure dressing that had soaked through. He was conscious but fading, his breath coming in wet, rattling gasps. Hey, Maya said, kneeling next to him. I'm here to get you out. What's your name? Torres, he gasped, and Maya felt something twist in her chest at the coincidence. Petty Officer? James Torres. Well, James Torres, I'm not letting you die in a basement. Maya was already assessing his wound, her hands gentle but thorough. Penetrating chest trauma, possible hemothorax, definitely needed a chest tube, but that would have to wait until they got him out. I need you to stay with me. Keep breathing. Keep talking. Can't breathe so good. I know, but you're doing great. Maya pulled a fresh occlusive dressing from her kit, replaced his soaked bandage with practiced efficiency. I'm going to get you out of here, I promise. A groan of stressed metal echoed through the basement, and dust rained down from above. The building was giving them warnings, counting down to collapse. Garrett's voice crackled over the radio. I've got the ensign, making my way back to the extraction point with her now. Copy, Maya responded. I've got a critical chest wound here. Going to need a basket stretcher if we have one. Negative on the stretcher. You'll have to carry him. Maya looked at Torres, easily 190, maybe 200 pounds, dead weight with a chest injury that could worsen if he was moved wrong. She ran the calculations in her head. Distance to extraction point, structural stability, her own physical limits after everything she'd already done tonight. The math didn't work. Not safely. But the alternative was leaving him, and that wasn't an option that existed in Maya's universe. I've got him, she said. Coming out now. She positioned Torres for a fireman's carry, mindful of his chest wound, trying to distribute his weight in a way that wouldn't compromise his breathing further. He groaned as she lifted him, his weight settling across her shoulders. Her leg, the one she'd been limping on for 3 months, the injury that had defined Maya Torres's weakness, screamed in protest. Old damage, poorly healed, never properly rehabilitated because she'd been too busy hiding to seek real medical care. Maya gritted her teeth and started moving. The path back to the extraction point was a nightmare of unstable debris and failing structure. Every step sent fresh pain shooting up her leg. Torres's weight pressed down on old injuries, on muscle memory written in scars and trauma. But she kept moving, one foot in front of the other, because stopping meant dying and dying meant failing, and failing meant this young petty officer bled out in a basement because she wasn't strong enough. Another explosion rocked the building. Smaller this time, but closer. A support beam 10 feet ahead collapsed with a shriek of tortured metal, blocking their path. Alternative route, Maya gasped into her radio. Primary path is blocked. Wraith, structural says you have maybe 5 minutes. Reeves's voice was tight. Any longer, and that entire section comes down. Then I better move faster. She found a side corridor, narrower and filled with more debris but still passable. Torres had gone quiet on her shoulders, his breathing shallow and rapid. Shock was setting in deeper, his body shutting down non-essential functions to preserve core organs. Stay with me, Torres, Maya said, her voice steady despite the burning in her lungs. We're almost there, almost home. You sound like my sister, he whispered. Yeah? She pretty amazing? She's in the Navy, too. Medic. She's always saving people. Maya's throat tightened. She'd be proud of you for holding on this long. The extraction point was ahead. She could see the chemical lights Garrett had placed, marking the path to the ventilation shaft. 30 yards, 20, 10. The building groaned, a deep sound that vibrated through the floor and walls. Maya's combat instincts screamed warnings her conscious mind had learned to trust. She threw herself forward, covering Torres's body with her own as the ceiling behind them collapsed in a cascade of concrete and rebar. Dust choked the air. Metal shrieked. For a terrible moment, Maya thought they were buried, thought this basement would be their tomb after all. Then Garrett's hands were there, pulling Torres from her shoulders, hauling them both toward the shaft. Move, move, move! They reached the shaft as another section of ceiling fell. Garrett clipped Torres into a rescue harness, signaled the surface team to haul him up. The petty officer disappeared into the shaft, his unconscious form rising toward safety. You next, Garrett said, reaching for Maya. She shook her head. You said 4 survivors. We've only got 2. The other 2 are in the west section. It's already collapsed. They're gone. You don't know that. Maya! Garrett grabbed her shoulders, his face hard. The building is coming down. Right now. We need to go. She looked past him into the darkness where the west section should be. calculation and emotion at war in her mind. The math said Garrett was right. The structure was failing. Going deeper would probably just add 2 more bodies to the casualty count, but probably wasn't certainly, and as long as there was a chance, a voice, faint and desperate, called from the darkness. "Help! Somebody! I've got Commander Wilson here! He's hurt bad!" Maya pulled free of Garrett's grip and ran toward the voice. "God damn it, Wraith!" Garrett followed, because that's what teammates did. They followed each other into hell because the alternative was living with knowing you could have tried. The west section was a hellscape of twisted metal and shattered concrete. Emergency lighting was completely out, leaving only the illumination from their helmet lights to cut through the dust and darkness. The voice called out again, closer now, directing them through the maze of destruction. They found them in what used to be an equipment storage room, a young lieutenant barely out of the academy, holding pressure on an older man's abdominal wound with hands that shook from exhaustion and fear. Commander Wilson was unconscious, his breathing shallow, his uniform soaked with blood that looked black in the harsh LED light. "Thank God," the lieutenant whispered. I didn't think anyone was coming." "We're here now." Maya was already kneeling next to the commander, her hands moving through rapid assessment. Penetrating abdominal trauma, likely liver or bowel perforation, massive blood loss, signs of hypovolemic shock. He needed surgery immediately, but first they had to get him out of a building that was actively collapsing around them. She looked at Garrett. "We need to move him now. No stretcher, no proper immobilization. This is going to be rough." "Can he survive the move?" Maya met his eyes. "He won't survive staying here." The building answered for her. Another section of ceiling collapsing somewhere close enough to send a shockwave through the floor. Dust and debris rained down, and the groaning of stressed metal became a constant background scream. "We go now," Garrett said. He lifted the commander in a modified carry while Maya and the lieutenant supported his injured side, trying to keep pressure on the wound while moving as fast as the terrain allowed. The trip back to the extraction point was a blur of desperate movement and failing structure. The building was dying around them, each support beam surrendering to physics and damage, each wall crumbling as the weight above found new paths to the ground. Maya's leg had gone from painful to numb, her body burning through adrenaline and sheer will in equal measure. They reached the shaft just as the ceiling behind them collapsed entirely, the sound like the end of the world compressed into 5 seconds of shrieking metal and pulverized concrete. Garrett got the commander clipped into the harness, signaled for extraction. The commander disappeared upward. "Lieutenant next," Maya gasped. "No way." The young officer's face was pale but determined. "You go. You're injured." "I'm fine." "You're limping so bad you can barely stand. Go." Maya didn't have the energy to argue. She let Garrett clip her into the harness, felt the tug as the surface team began hauling her up through smoke and darkness toward the circle of night sky that meant salvation. She was 10 feet from the top when the building finally gave up. The entire east section collapsed with a roar that drowned out everything else, sending a pressure wave up the shaft that slammed Maya against the walls hard enough to crack ribs. The rope jerked, swung wild, and for a terrible moment she thought it would snap and send her plummeting back into the wreckage. Then hands grabbed her, pulled her over the edge of the shaft, dragged her away from the collapsing building as tons of concrete and steel compressed themselves into a tomb of dust and destruction. Maya lay on the ground, coughing, her lungs burning from smoke and dust and exertion. Someone was shouting about casualties, about checking for survivors, about... "Garrett," she gasped, trying to sit up. "The lieutenant. They were right behind me." Reeves appeared in her field of vision, his face grim. They made it out, both of them, 30 seconds before the final collapse. Maya let her head fall back, relief washing through her in waves. 4 survivors. All accounted for, all alive because people had been willing to run into a collapsing building instead of calculating acceptable losses. "You're insane," Reeves said, but there was something almost like pride in his voice. "Completely, thoroughly insane." "Runs in the family," Maya muttered. She tried to stand, made it about halfway before her leg gave out and she crashed back to the ground with a gasp of pain. A corpsman was there immediately, shining a light on her leg, cutting away the turnout gear to expose the swelling and discoloration that spoke of fresh damage to old injuries. "Ma'am, this needs imaging, possibly surgery. You need to get to medical." After. Maya pushed his hands away, crawled to her feet through sheer bloody-mindedness. I need to check on the patients first. You need to... I said after. She limped toward the staging area, each step agony, but movement was still possible, and as long as movement was possible, she could still do her job. The staging area had transformed during her time in the building. Supplies were organized. Patients were properly triaged and labeled. Transport was coordinated and efficient. The lieutenant she'd challenged earlier was running the operation with competence born of proper structure and clear protocols. He looked up as Maya approached, his expression complicated. Commander Wilson is critical but stable. We're airlifting him to Balboa Naval Medical Center. Petty Officer Torres is in surgery now. Initial reports say he should make it. He paused. You saved their lives, all 4 of them. No one else would have gone in there. You would have, Maya said quietly. If you'd had the training. You're a good officer, Lieutenant. You just needed a better system. She moved through the staging area, checking on the patients she'd triaged earlier, making notes that she dictated to a corpsman with a tablet. Her medical mind cataloged injuries and treatments with the same precision that had defined her entire career, even as her body screamed for rest. That's when she saw them. 4 figures standing at the edge of the staging area, backlit by emergency lights, watching her with expressions she couldn't quite read from this distance. But she didn't need to see their faces clearly to know who they were. She knew them by their posture, by the way they moved, by the space they occupied in the world. Her old team, the people she'd left behind, the brothers and sisters who'd mourned her. Staff Sergeant Diego Rodriguez stepped forward first, his face a mask of controlled emotion. Behind him, Lieutenant Sarah Chen, Corpsman First Class Marcus Wright, and Petty Officer First Class Amanda Foster formed up, a unit even in grief and shock and whatever else they were feeling. Maya felt her legs go weak, and this time it wasn't from the injury. Rodriguez closed the distance between them slowly, like he was approaching something fragile that might shatter. He stopped 3 feet away, his dark eyes searching her face for the person he'd known beneath the smoke and exhaustion and blood. 18 months, he said, his voice carefully level. 18 months we looked for you. 18 months we believed you were alive somewhere. 18 months we got called crazy for not giving up. Maya couldn't speak, couldn't find words adequate to the moment. We held a memorial service, Chen said, her voice breaking. We said goodbye. We told stories about you like you were past tense, and all that time you were... Hiding, Maya whispered. I was hiding. I'm sorry. I'm so... Rodriguez moved faster than she expected, pulling her into a fierce embrace that drove the air from her lungs and made her cracked ribs scream. But the pain didn't matter because his voice was in her ear saying, You're alive. You're really alive. Nothing else matters. You're alive. Then Chen was there, and Wright, and Foster, all of them surrounding her in a tangle of arms and tears and words that tumbled over each other too fast to process. Maya felt something break inside her, the last wall she'd built, the final defense that had kept her isolated and alone for so long. She was sobbing, she realized, actually crying for the first time since Helmand, 18 months of grief and guilt and pain pouring out in the middle of a disaster zone while her team held her together. I couldn't face you, she gasped. I disobeyed orders. I got myself killed. You saved 43 people, Rodriguez said fiercely. You did the right thing even when it cost you everything. You think we were angry about that? You think we blamed you? Command did. The after-action reports, Command can go to hell. Chen's voice was hard. We read those reports. We know what really happened. You were a hero, Maya. You've always been a hero. The moment was shattered by the sound of vehicles approaching, not military this time, but civilian. Black sedans with government plates and the kind of aggressive parking that suggested people who were used to getting their way. Captain Richard Vance emerged from the lead vehicle, along with 2 military police officers and a woman in a suit that screamed JAG lawyer. His face was set in hard lines as he approached the group. Captain Cross, he said formally, I'm going to need you to come with me, now. Rodriguez stepped between them, his posture shifting to combat ready in an instant. On whose authority? On the authority of Naval Special Warfare Command and pending charges of desertion, AWOL, and unauthorized disclosure of classified information. Vance's voice was cold. Captain Cross has been evading military justice for 18 months. That ends tonight. She just saved 4 lives, Reeves said, appearing from the staging area. She coordinated a mass casualty response. She went into a collapsing building when everyone else said it was impossible. And you want to arrest her? I want to enforce military law, Vance corrected. Her actions tonight don't erase 18 months of desertion. They don't excuse abandoning her unit. They don't justify the security breach her disappearance represents. Maya stepped out from behind Rodriguez, her chin raised. He's right. Maya, no, Chen started. He's right, Maya repeated. I went AWOL. I disappeared without authorization. I let you all think I was dead when I was alive. Those are facts. They have consequences. Consequences? Rodriguez's voice rose. You want to talk about consequences? You saved 43 civilians when following orders would have meant their massacre. You preserved your team when extraction seemed impossible. You've spent the last 18 months punishing yourself for doing the right thing. How many more consequences do you need to pay? Until the books are balanced, Maya said quietly. Until I've answered for what I did. Vance gestured to the MPs. Captain Cross, you're under arrest pending investigation and court-martial proceedings. You have the right to... The roar of a helicopter cut him off. Not military transport this time, but a civilian news chopper, its searchlight sweeping across the disaster zone. And behind it, 2 more. The media had arrived, drawn by reports of the explosion and the dramatic rescue operation. One of the news crews on the ground had already set up, their camera pointed directly at the confrontation playing out in the staging area. A reporter was speaking urgently into a microphone, and Maya could see the red light indicating they were broadcasting live. This is exactly what we don't need, Vance said through gritted teeth. Get her in the vehicle, now. The MPS moved toward Maya, and her team shifted to block them. A wall of muscle and loyalty and barely suppressed violence. Stand down, Maya said to her team. That's an order. You don't give us orders anymore, Rodriguez said. You're not our commanding officer. No, but I'm still your teammate, and I'm asking you to let me do this, please. The standoff held for 3 heartbeats before her team reluctantly stepped aside. The MPs moved in, producing handcuffs that glinted in the emergency lights. That's when Gerald Hoskins appeared, running from one of the civilian vehicles, his face flushed and his expensive suit rumpled. With him was a man Maya didn't recognize, older, distinguished, carrying himself with the confidence of someone who'd spent years in positions of power. Stop, Hoskins shouted. Everyone just stop. Vance turned, his expression darkening. Mr. Hoskins, this is a military matter. You have no... This is a public relations nightmare is what this is, Hoskins interrupted. He gestured to the news cameras, to the recording devices pointed at them from multiple angles. You're about to arrest a woman who just saved multiple lives in front of rolling cameras. Do you have any idea what that's going to look like? I don't care what it looks like. I care about military justice. The man with Hoskins stepped forward, and something about his bearing made even Vance pause. Captain Vance, I'm Admiral Thomas Morrison, commander of Naval Special Warfare Command. I believe we spoke on the phone earlier this evening. Vance's face went pale. Admiral, sir? I didn't know you were coming personally. Clearly. Morrison's voice was dry. He looked at Maya with eyes that had assessed countless personnel over a 30-year career. Captain Cross, we finally meet. I've read a great deal about you. Sir, Maya said, standing as straight as her injuries allowed, I've read the after-action reports from Helmand Province. I've reviewed the recommendations for commendation that your team submitted, and I've spent the last 18 months dealing with the political fallout from an operation that should never have been ordered the way it was. Morrison paused. You were put in an impossible situation, Captain. You made a choice that reflected your training, your values, and your commitment to preserving innocent life. That choice had consequences. For you, for your team, for the mission. But it also had results. 43 people lived. Intelligence was gathered that saved countless more. And you demonstrated the kind of judgment under pressure that we spend millions of dollars trying to train into our special operators. I still violated direct orders, sir. You did. And that violation is going to be reviewed through proper channels. not in a dramatic arrest in front of news cameras. Morrison looked at Vance. Captain, stand down. Captain Cross will report to Naval Base Point Loma at 0800 tomorrow for formal debriefing and status review. But she's not going in handcuffs like a criminal, not after what she did tonight. Vance's jaw worked. Sir, with all respect, she's been AWOL for 18 months. She's a flight risk. We need to secure her. She walked into a collapsing building to save 4 trapped personnel, Morrison interrupted. Does that sound like someone who's going to run? She's here, Captain. She's facing this. Give her the dignity she's earned. The confrontation hung in the balance, Vance clearly warring between his orders and the reality of the situation unfolding in front of him. Finally, reluctantly, he gestured for the MPS to stand down. Thank you, sir, he said stiffly. Morrison turned back to Maya. Captain Cross, do I have your word you'll report tomorrow morning? Yes, sir. Good. He glanced at her team, still hovering protectively nearby. Rodriguez, Chen, Wright, Foster, you'll escort Captain Cross to quarters for tonight. Make sure she gets medical attention for that leg, and make sure she actually shows up tomorrow. Count on it, sir, Rodriguez said. Morrison started to leave, then paused. Captain Cross? One more thing. Your team never stopped believing you were alive. They never gave up. That kind of loyalty says something about the kind of leader you are. Remember that when you're deciding what comes next. He walked away, taking Vance and the MPs with him, leaving Maya standing in the middle of the staging area with her team and too many emotions to process. Hoskins cleared his throat. Captain Cross, I owe you an apology. Several apologies, actually. Dr. Chen and Nurse Brennan told me you were incompetent, disruptive, a liability. They recommended your termination multiple times, and I listened to them because they were senior staff and you were new. I'm sorry for that. Why tell me this now? Maya asked. Because I just spent the last hour watching security footage from tonight's incident at Cascade General. Because I saw you diagnose a STEMI the attending missed. I saw you organize a mass casualty response when everyone else panicked. I saw you save lives while my staff tried to destroy you. He pulled out his phone, showed her a paused video. And because one of our patients, Mrs. Williams, just went viral explaining how a nurse everyone dismissed saved her husband's life while the expert doctors stood around. 20 million views in 3 hours. The media is calling you a hero. Maya looked at the phone screen, saw her own face frozen in the moment she'd grabbed the crash cart, saw the determination and competence that everyone at Cascade General had spent 3 months trying to convince her didn't exist. Dr. Chen and Nurse Brennan have been placed on administrative leave pending investigation, Hoskins continued. We're reviewing every case they supervised, every personnel decision they made. And we'd like to offer you your job back, Captain, with full acknowledgement of your skills, proper placement, and a formal apology. I appreciate that, Maya said, but I don't think I'm meant to be Maya Torres anymore. She looked at her team, Rodriguez grinning despite everything, Chen wiping tears from her face, Wright and Foster standing ready to support her through whatever came next. This was where she belonged. Not hiding in a civilian hospital, pretending to be less than she was. Not running from consequences or drowning in guilt. Here, with people who knew exactly who she was and valued her anyway. Besides, Maya added, I have a feeling tomorrow's meeting is going to determine my immediate future. Whatever happens, Rodriguez said, we're with you. All the way. They were walking toward the vehicles when Maya's radio crackled one more time. It was the base hospital, calling for her specifically. This is Wraith, she said, using her call sign automatically now. Wraith, this is Balboa Naval Medical Center. Commander Wilson just came out of surgery. He's stable. The surgeon said he wouldn't have made it to the OR if you hadn't maintained pressure on that abdominal wound during extraction. They wanted you to know you saved his life. Maya closed her eyes, letting the words wash over her. One more life. One more person who got to go home to their family because she'd been willing to walk into hell when everyone else said it was impossible. This was who she was, not Maya Torres, the quiet nurse everyone ignored, not a deserter or a traitor or someone who needed to hide. Captain Maya Cross. Wraith. Combat medic, someone who ran toward disaster when everyone else ran away. She was just starting to accept that truth when her phone buzzed. A text message from an unknown number, but the area code was Washington, D.C. The message was brief. Senate Armed Services Committee has questions about Helmand Province. Your testimony has been requested. This is not optional. Meeting location will be disclosed after tomorrow's debriefing. Come prepared to defend your decisions to people who've never made them. Maya stared at the message, her stomach sinking. Tomorrow's debriefing was just the beginning. The real reckoning was coming, public, political, and completely beyond her control. Rodriguez saw her face. What is it? She showed him the message. His expression darkened. Senate committee, he said quietly. They're going to put you on trial in front of the whole country. I know. You're not doing this alone. Maya looked at him, at all of them, at the family she'd thought she'd lost forever. I don't think they're going to give me a choice. Then we make them, Chen said fiercely. You testified for us when it mattered. Now we testify for you. The convoy of vehicles finally arrived to transport the last casualties to proper medical facilities. Maya's team helped her into one of the SUVs, ignoring her protests that she could walk. Her leg had swollen to nearly twice its normal size, the pain a constant drumbeat beneath the fading adrenaline. As they drove away from Coronado Naval Station, Maya watched the disaster zone recede in the rearview mirror. Somewhere behind them, news crews were already filing reports about the mysterious former combat medic who'd emerged from hiding to save lives. Somewhere in Washington, politicians were preparing questions designed to destroy her credibility. And somewhere in a military legal office, people were building a case that could end with her in prison. But tonight, in this moment, surrounded by people who knew her and valued her and refused to let her face this alone, Maya felt something she hadn't felt in 18 months. She felt like herself again. The SUV turned onto the highway, heading toward Point Loma and whatever tomorrow would bring. Rodriguez sat across from her, studying her face with the familiarity of someone who'd served with her through multiple deployments. You ready for this? He asked quietly. Maya thought about the question, about Senate committees and court-martial proceedings and media circuses, about facing the consequences of choices made in impossible circumstances, about standing in front of the world and defending decisions that had cost her everything but saved 43 lives. No, she said honestly, but I'm done running. Rodriguez nodded slowly. Then he pulled something from his tactical vest, a patch, faded and worn, with a ghost emblem and a single word beneath it. Wraith. Been carrying this since the memorial service, he said. Figured if we ever found you, you'd need it back. Maya took the patch with shaking hands, her fingers tracing the embroidered letters that represented everything she'd tried to leave behind and everything she'd always been. She was still holding it when her phone lit up with another message. This one from Commander Reeves. FYI, Dr. Chen just filed assault charges against you with Cascade General, claims you physically threatened him and created a hostile work environment. Hospital Legal is reviewing. This is going to get messy. Maya showed the message to Rodriguez, who read it and laughed, a hard, bitter sound. Let them come, he said. They want to fight? We'll give them one they'll never forget. But Maya was already thinking 3 steps ahead, calculating angles and consequences, and the reality that her actions tonight had just painted a target on her back from multiple directions. Military brass who wanted her example buried, civilian authorities who saw her as a liability, medical professionals whose egos couldn't handle being shown up by someone they'd dismissed. The convoy pulled up to the base housing that would serve as temporary quarters. Maya's team helped her out of the vehicle, supported her weight as they walked toward the building. She was halfway to the door when a figure stepped out of the shadows, a woman in civilian clothes with credentials hanging from her neck. Captain Cross, the woman said, I'm Agent Sarah Morrison, Naval Criminal Investigative Service. I need you to come with me, now. Rodriguez stepped forward immediately, his hand moving toward his sidearm before catching himself. NCIS has no jurisdiction over active military personnel during an ongoing operation. Captain Cross is under military protection pending tomorrow's debriefing. Agent Morrison's expression didn't change. This isn't about jurisdiction, Staff Sergeant. This is about a criminal investigation into potential security breaches and unauthorized access to classified systems. Captain Cross's fingerprints were found in a secure database at Cascade General Hospital. a database she shouldn't have known existed, let alone accessed. Maya felt ice flood her veins. The secure database. She'd accessed it exactly once, 3 months ago when she'd first started at the hospital, looking for information on a patient transfer that seemed wrong. The system had been hidden behind layers of administrative access, protected by military-grade encryption that should have been impossible to crack without specialized knowledge. Knowledge that Maya Torres, civilian nurse, shouldn't have possessed. Knowledge that Captain Maya Cross, former intelligence-cleared combat medic, absolutely had. I was checking patient records, Maya said carefully. Standard nursing duties. The database you accessed contained classified medical records for active duty personnel undergoing experimental treatments, Morrison said. Treatments that are part of a black budget program that doesn't officially exist. You accessed those files 17 times over 3 months. You downloaded patient data, and you did it using bypass codes that only someone with DevGru level clearance would know. Reeves appeared from the shadows, his face grim. Agent Morrison, Captain Cross has been with my team for the last 6 hours. Whatever investigation you're conducting can wait until after she's been medically cleared and debriefed. Actually, Commander, it can't. Morrison pulled out her tablet, showed them a screen full of file access logs. Because 12 hours ago, someone used those same bypass codes to access the database remotely and download the complete patient roster. Every name, every diagnosis, every experimental protocol. Someone just handed our entire classified medical research program to an unknown party. That wasn't me, Maya said immediately. I haven't been near a computer in 12 hours. I've been saving lives, not stealing data. Then who did? Morrison's eyes were hard. Because the access codes are unique to you. The digital signature matches your login pattern, and the timing coincides perfectly with when you disappeared from Cascade General under military escort. Maya's mind raced through the possibilities, landing on the most obvious answer with sickening certainty. Someone cloned my access credentials. They've been watching me, waiting for the right moment to use my identity as cover for espionage. That's a convenient theory, Morrison said. It's also exactly what someone caught committing espionage would say. Chen stepped forward, her face flushed with anger. You're accusing her of being a spy? She just walked into a collapsing building to save 4 people. She spent 18 months hiding because she thought she was protecting classified information. She's not a traitor. Then she's a security risk, Morrison said flatly. Either she knowingly compromised sensitive information, or she was so careless with her credentials that someone else could exploit them. Either way, she's coming with me for questioning. Maya felt the walls closing in again, different walls, but the same crushing pressure. She'd spent 18 months running from one nightmare only to walk straight into another. I want a lawyer, she said quietly. You'll get one, after we establish the scope of the breach and determine whether you're a flight risk. Morrison gestured to 2 NCIS agents who'd appeared from a second vehicle. Captain Cross, you're being detained under suspicion of espionage, theft of classified materials, and conspiracy to commit acts against national security. Rodriguez moved to physically block the agents, and suddenly the entire situation was a hair's breadth from exploding into violence. Maya could see it in the set of her team's shoulders, the way they'd positioned themselves in a defensive perimeter, ready to fight federal agents to protect her. Stand down, Maya said, her voice carrying command authority, despite the exhaustion. All of you stand down, that's an order. Maya, Rodriguez started. I said stand down, Diego. She looked at him, at all of them, trying to convey with her eyes what she couldn't say aloud. I'll handle this. Trust me. The agents moved in with handcuffs, and this time there was no Admiral Morrison to intervene, no dramatic stay of execution. Maya felt the cold metal close around her wrists, heard the Miranda rights being recited in Agent Morrison's flat, professional tone. She was being led to the NCIS vehicle when her phone buzzed in her pocket. The agent reaching for it paused when Reeves said, That's her personal property. You need a warrant to search it. We have one, Morrison said, producing a document. Signed 30 minutes ago by a federal judge. Everything Captain Cross owns is subject to search and seizure pending this investigation. The agent pulled out Maya's phone, glanced at the screen, then showed it to Morrison. Whatever the message said made the NCIS agent's expression tighten. What is it? Maya asked. Morrison turned the phone to show her. The message was from the same Washington, D.C. number that had contacted her earlier. Congratulations, Captain Cross. Your actions tonight guaranteed our success. The Senate hearing is canceled. You're far more useful to us facing criminal charges. Your silence has been purchased by your own stupidity. Maya read it twice, the implications hitting like physical blows. She'd been played. The entire night, every decision she'd made had been part of someone else's plan. They'd wanted her exposed, wanted her compromised, wanted her facing charges serious enough that any testimony she gave about Helmand Province would be dismissed as the desperate lies of a criminal trying to cut a deal. I don't know who sent that message, Maya said, but her voice sounded hollow even to her own ears. Add witness tampering to the list, Morrison said. She nodded to the agents. Get her processed. Full security protocols, no contact with outside parties until we've established the extent of the conspiracy. They were putting Maya in the vehicle when a new voice cut through the tension, older, authoritative, carrying the weight of decades in federal law enforcement. Agent Morrison, step away from the prisoner. A man in his 60s emerged from another vehicle, his FBI credentials held high enough for everyone to see. Behind him were 4 more agents, all wearing the distinct markers of a major crimes task force. Morrison's face went pale. Assistant Director Hartley, Sir, we have a developing situation. You have a compromised investigation, Hartley interrupted, and you're about to make it worse by arresting the wrong person. He approached Maya directly, studying her face with the assessment of someone who'd spent a career reading people. Captain Cross, I'm Assistant Director James Hartley, FBI. I've been investigating a conspiracy to steal classified medical research for the last 8 months. Your name came up 6 weeks ago, but not as a suspect, as a target. Maya felt something shift in the pressure surrounding her. What are you talking about? The database you accessed at Cascade General? It's bait. Has been for 3 months. We've been running a counterintelligence operation, feeding false information through that system to identify who's trying to steal our research. Everyone who accessed it was flagged and monitored, Hartley gestured to Morrison. Agent Morrison is part of that operation. She's supposed to identify genuine threats, not arrest the people we're using as canaries in the coal mine. Morrison's face had shifted from pale to red. Sir, the protocol said anyone accessing the database should be detained for questioning. The protocols say suspects should be detained. Captain Cross isn't a suspect. She's a victim. Hartley pulled out his own tablet, showed them a different set of logs. Someone's been monitoring her digital activities since she started at Cascade General. They cloned her credentials 3 weeks ago. They've been waiting for the right moment to use her identity to steal the real research data. And they made their move tonight while Captain Cross was otherwise occupied saving lives in front of multiple witnesses. How do you know it wasn't coordinated? Morrison demanded. She could have set up tonight as an alibi while accomplices executed the theft. Because the theft happened while she was physically inside a collapsing building with no communications access, Hartley said, his patience clearly wearing thin. We have her exact location tracked by her phone, by Commander Reeves's team radio logs, and by 3 different news helicopters that caught her on camera performing rescue operations. Unless she's developed the ability to be in 2 places at once, she's clean. Maya felt relief flood through her, followed immediately by anger. So I've been under surveillance for 3 months? You've been watching me, using me as bait, and you didn't think to warn me? Warning you would have compromised the operation, Hartley said. We needed the real thieves to believe you were unaware of the trap. We needed them to move against you so we could identify them. And did you? Reeves asked, his voice hard. Identify them? Hartley's expression darkened. We're close. The data theft tonight was sloppy, rushed. They panicked when Captain Cross's cover was blown and she started getting public attention. They needed to execute their plan before she could be properly secured. That kind of panic leads to mistakes. What kind of mistakes? Maya asked. The kind that leave digital fingerprints. Hartley gestured to one of his agents, who pulled up a screen showing network traffic patterns. The theft originated from inside Cascade General Hospital, specifically from a terminal in the administrative offices that required senior staff credentials to access. Morrison had gone very quiet, her earlier certainty evaporating. Are you saying someone on the hospital staff is involved in espionage? I'm saying someone on the hospital staff coordinated with outside parties to steal classified research and frame Captain Cross for it, Hartley corrected. And we're about to find out who. His phone rang. He answered it, listened for 30 seconds, and a slow, satisfied smile spread across his face. Outstanding. Bring them in. He ended the call and looked at the assembled group. 15 minutes ago, FBI agents executed warrants at 3 locations in Silverton Bay. Cascade General Hospital's administrative office, the home of Dr. Harrison Chen, and the apartment of Victoria Brennan, the ER charge nurse. All 3 locations yielded evidence of conspiracy to commit espionage. Maya felt the world tilt sideways. Dr. Chen and Victoria? They were trying to steal classified research? Not exactly. Hartley pulled up more files on his tablet. Dr. Chen was being blackmailed. He'd been falsifying patient billing records for years, running a private insurance fraud scheme. Someone found out and threatened to expose him unless he provided access to the classified database. He didn't know what he was stealing. He just knew his career was over if he didn't cooperate. And Victoria? Maya asked, though part of her already knew the answer. Victoria Brennan is the primary actor. Former Navy intelligence officer, dishonorably discharged 7 years ago for unauthorized access to classified systems. She's been working with a foreign intelligence service, using her position at Cascade General to identify and exploit security vulnerabilities in military medical programs. Hartley's expression was grim. She targeted you specifically, Captain Cross. She knew who you really were from the moment you walked into that hospital. The implications crashed over Maya like a wave. Every humiliation, every dismissal, every calculated moment of cruelty designed to keep her isolated and demoralized, it had all been intentional. Victoria had known exactly who Maya was and had systematically destroyed her credibility so that when the frame-up came, no one would believe her denials. She engineered my entire experience at that hospital, Maya said slowly. She made sure I was assigned the worst cases, blamed for mistakes, kept away from anything important. She was building a narrative of incompetence so that when I was accused of espionage, it would look like desperation or stupidity, not malicious action. Exactly, Hartley confirmed. And it almost worked. If you hadn't been forced into that mass casualty situation tonight, if you hadn't demonstrated your real capabilities in front of witnesses, the frame would have been perfect. A disgraced combat medic hiding under a false identity, stealing classified research out of desperation or revenge. The story writes itself. Rodriguez's hands had clenched into fists. Where is she now? Where's Brennan? In custody, Hartley said, along with Dr. Chen and 3 other conspirators we've been tracking. They're all being processed at the federal building downtown. Morrison had taken several steps back, her earlier certainty completely shattered. I apologize, Captain Cross. I was following protocols based on incomplete information. I should have coordinated better with the FBI task force. You should have done your job instead of jumping to conclusions, Reeves said coldly. You were so eager to make an arrest that you didn't bother to verify the intelligence. Maya held up her hand, stopping the argument before it could escalate. Agent Morrison made a mistake, but she was also working with information designed to mislead her. The real enemy is whoever set this entire operation in motion. Which brings us to the larger problem, Hartley said. Victoria Brennan is a foot soldier. She was taking orders from someone higher up the chain, someone with access to military personnel records, someone who knew Captain Cross's real identity and her location, someone inside the system. The implications of that statement hung in the air like poison gas. Reeves's phone rang. He answered it, listened, and his face went from grim to furious. Say that again, slowly. He put the phone on speaker. Admiral Morrison's voice came through, and he sounded 20 years older than he had earlier. Commander, we have a situation. Captain Richard Vance has disappeared. His office was cleared out, his computer wiped, and his service vehicle was found abandoned at the Canadian border. He's gone. Maya felt the pieces click into place with terrible clarity. Vance? He had access to my personnel file. He knew I was alive before anyone else. He pushed for my immediate arrest, tried to prevent me from being debriefed properly. He wanted me locked up before I could tell anyone what really happened in Helmand Province. Because Helmand Province wasn't just about saving civilians, Hartley said, his voice quiet. It was about what you saw while you were there, what intelligence you gathered, what you discovered about weapons trafficking and corruption that went far beyond a single operation. Maya's mind raced back 18 months, to the 6 hours she'd spent pinned down in that village, to the weapons she'd cataloged from enemy combatants, American weapons, military grade, with serial numbers that should have been decommissioned years ago, to the communications she'd intercepted that suggested coordination between Taliban forces and someone inside the U.S. military supply chain. She'd put it all in her after-action report, the report that had been classified so heavily that even her team had never seen the full version. The report that had disappeared entirely 6 months after she was declared KYA. Vance was involved in the weapons trafficking, Maya said. He was part of the corruption I discovered. And when I refused to extract and leave those civilians, when I stayed and gathered intelligence, I became a threat to his entire operation. That's why the extraction was delayed. That's why we were left there for 6 hours while communication issues were resolved. He was hoping we'd all be killed before we could report what we'd found. And when you survived but disappeared, he thought he was safe, Hartley continued. Until tonight, when you resurfaced publicly. Suddenly you were a living witness to his crimes, with credibility that would only grow as your heroism became public knowledge. He couldn't allow that. So he activated Brennan, Reeves said, following the logic. Used her to frame Captain Cross for espionage, destroy her credibility before she could testify about Helmand. If Maya had been arrested tonight for stealing classified research, anything she said about Vance's corruption would be dismissed as lies from a desperate criminal. Admiral Morrison's voice came through the speaker again. We're launching a full investigation. Every operation Vance touched, every decision he made, every person he worked with. This is going to tear through the entire command structure. Good, Maya said, her voice hard. Let it burn. Whatever needs to be exposed, expose it. Hartley gestured to Morrison to remove Maya's handcuffs. The NCIS agent complied wordlessly, her face reflecting the knowledge that she'd nearly derailed a major investigation through overeager prosecution. Maya rubbed her wrists, feeling the circulation return. What happens now? Now you tell your story, Hartley said. Everything you saw in Helmand, everything you discovered, everything you've been carrying for 18 months. We build a case against Vance and everyone involved in his network, and we make sure that what happened to you, what they tried to do to you, never happens to another service member. The Senate hearing, Maya said, the one I was told about, was that real or part of the frame-up? It was real, Admiral Morrison said through the speaker, and it's still happening. But now instead of defending yourself against accusations of desertion, you'll be testifying about corruption in military procurement and weapons trafficking. Your story just changed from court-martial to congressional investigation. Maya looked at her team, at the people who'd never stopped believing in her, who'd spent 18 months searching for answers that everyone else said didn't exist. I want them there. All of them. They were part of this too. They deserve to be heard. Agreed, Morrison said. Your entire team will be called to testify. This is bigger than one operation, Captain. This is about systemic corruption that's gotten people killed. Your refusal to follow illegal orders in Helmand? That's about to become the catalyst for the biggest military corruption investigation in decades. Reeves was already making calls, coordinating security and logistics. Chen pulled Maya into another fierce hug, whispering, We've got you, all the way to the end. Maya's phone buzzed again, a different message this time, from a number that made her blood run cold. It was Vance's personal cell, the one she'd seen him use earlier that evening. You think you've won, Captain Cross? You think exposing me changes anything? I'm one man in a network that runs through every level of military command. They'll protect their own. You'll testify and they'll bury you under classified protocols and national security concerns. No one will believe you, and even if they do, nothing will change. The machine is too big. You're just one person. Maya read the message aloud, her voice steady despite the fury building in her chest. When she finished, the silence was absolute. Then Hartley smiled, and it was a predator's expression. Captain Vance just made a critical mistake. He used his personal cell phone, which means we can track him. He admitted to being part of a larger conspiracy, which gives us grounds to expand our investigation. And he threatened a federal witness, which adds another felony to his growing list of charges. He gestured to his agents. Trace that call, find him, and get warrants for everyone in his contact list. If Vance says the network runs deep, let's see how deep it really goes. Maya felt something settle in her chest. Not peace, but purpose. For 18 months, she'd been running, hiding, trying to make herself small enough to disappear. Tonight, she'd been forced back into the light, and instead of destroying her, it had given her the platform she needed to fight back. "When do we leave for Washington?" she asked. "Tomorrow afternoon," Hartley said. "We'll coordinate with Admiral Morrison to ensure proper security. You'll be under federal protection until the hearing. No more attempts to frame you, no more threats, no more hiding." "And Cascade General?" Maya asked. "What happens to the hospital?" Hartley's expression darkened. "The hospital's CEO, Gerald Hoskins, has been cooperating with our investigation for the last 3 weeks. He discovered discrepancies in Victoria Brennan's background check and contacted us, but he was under orders to continue operating normally to avoid alerting the conspirators. That's going to be a problem for his legal team to sort out." "Dr. Chen?" Maya asked, though she wasn't sure why she cared about the man who'd spent 3 months making her life miserable. "He's cooperating," Hartley said. "Gave us access to every communication he had with his handlers, every file he accessed, every transaction he made. He's looking at prison time, but significantly less than if he'd stayed silent. His testimony will help us map the entire conspiracy network." Maya thought about the attending physician who had screamed at her, thrown instruments, publicly humiliated her in front of the entire ER staff. He'd been a bully and a fraud, but he'd also been a victim of blackmail, forced into espionage by threats to his career and family. She couldn't forgive him, but she could understand how fear made people compromise themselves in ways they never imagined possible. "What about the patients?" Maya asked. "The ones in the experimental program whose files were stolen?" "Already being relocated and resecured," Admiral Morrison said through the speaker. "We're implementing new protocols, new facilities, new oversight. This breach won't happen again." "You can't promise that," Maya said. "As long as there are secrets worth stealing and people desperate or greedy enough to sell them, this will keep happening." "Maybe," Morrison conceded, "but we can make it harder. We can close the vulnerabilities that people like Vance and Brennan exploited, and we can hold the guilty accountable instead of burying the truth to avoid embarrassment." Reeves ended his call and turned to Maya. "Medical just contacted me. You need imaging on that leg and probably surgery to repair whatever damage you did in that building collapse. They're standing by at Balboa Naval Medical Center." Maya looked down at her leg, which had swollen to the point where her pants were cutting off circulation. The adrenaline was fading, and the pain was becoming impossible to ignore. "How bad is it?" "Bad enough that you're limping worse than when you were pretending to be injured," Rodriguez said. "You need real medical attention, Maya, not field medicine. Not toughing it out. Real treatment." "After," Maya said. "After what?" "After I see Victoria Brennan." Maya's voice was quiet but absolute. "I need to look her in the eye and hear her explain why. Why she targeted me specifically. Why she spent 3 months destroying me psychologically when she could have just stolen the data and disappeared. I need to understand what I did to make her hate me that much." Hartley considered her request. "I can arrange it. Brief conversation, supervised, on record. But, Captain, be prepared for the answer to disappoint you. People like Brennan don't need personal reasons to hurt others. Sometimes you were just convenient." "I still need to know," Maya said. 30 minutes later, they were in an interrogation room at the FBI field office in downtown Silverton Bay. Victoria Brennan sat on the other side of a metal table, her hands cuffed, her face showing none of the false warmth she'd worn at Cascade General. She looked at Maya with flat, empty eyes that held no remorse, no recognition of wrongdoing, nothing but calculation. "Captain Cross," Victoria said, her voice carrying the same professional tone she'd used when assigning Maya the worst cases in the ER. "I wondered if you'd come." "Why me?" Maya asked, sitting down across from her. "You knew who I was from the beginning. You knew I was hiding, that I was vulnerable. But you didn't just exploit that. You actively worked to destroy me. Why?" Victoria smiled, and it was the first genuine expression Maya had seen on her face. "Because you represented everything I hated about the military. You were special, chosen, given opportunities that other people like me had to fight for. You got medals and recognition while I got discharged for doing exactly what you did. Breaking rules I thought were wrong. You were discharged for stealing classified information," Hartley said from his position by the door. That's not the same as refusing immoral orders, isn't it? Victoria's eyes never left Maya's face. We both violated protocols because we thought we knew better than our commanding officers. We both put our personal judgment above the chain of command. We both thought we were special enough to decide which rules applied to us. The only difference is that when I did it, I got caught. When you did it, you got to disappear and reinvent yourself. So yes, Captain Cross, I targeted you specifically because watching you pretend to be incompetent, watching you limp around my ER like a wounded animal, watching everyone dismiss you and underestimate you, it gave me pleasure. You got to be a hero while I became a criminal. I wanted you to know what that felt like. Maya absorbed the words, searching for the anger or hurt she expected to feel, but all she found was pity. You're right about one thing. We both broke rules. But I did it to save lives. You did it to sell secrets and advance your own interests. That's the difference between us, Victoria. Not our outcomes. Our choices. Victoria's smile faded. You think you're better than me? You think your moral certainty makes you righteous? You're going to testify in front of Congress and they're going to tear you apart. They're going to find every mistake you ever made, every order you violated, every person you put at risk with your heroics. And when they're done, you'll be exactly where I am, broken and discarded. Maybe, Maya said, standing up. But I'll be able to look at myself in the mirror. Can you? She turned and walked out of the interrogation room without waiting for an answer. Hartley followed her into the hallway where her team was waiting. Feel better? He asked. No, Maya admitted. But at least I understand. She didn't hate me personally. She hated what I represented. A chance at redemption she'd already lost. I was a reminder that she'd made different choices and faced different consequences. People like Brennan always find ways to justify their actions, Hartley said. The enemy isn't personal inadequacy or bad luck or an unfair system. It's everyone else's success. They were walking toward the exit when Maya's phone rang. Unknown number again, but this time when she answered, the voice on the other end was familiar. Captain Cross, this is Gerald Hoskins. I know you have no reason to listen to me, but I need you to know that I've fired Dr. Harrison Chen effective immediately. His actions, both the insurance fraud and the espionage cooperation, have been reported to the medical board and law enforcement. He'll never practice medicine again. That's not enough, Maya said. I know. That's why I'm also announcing a complete restructuring of Cascade General's hiring and oversight protocols. Every staff member who contributed to the hostile environment you experienced will face consequences. I've reviewed the security footage from your entire employment. I've seen how you were treated, how you were dismissed and belittled and excluded. That culture ends now. Why are you telling me this? Maya asked. Because you deserve to know that people are being held accountable. And because I wanted to personally invite you to return to Cascade General as our new Director of Emergency Medicine. Full authority, competitive salary, complete autonomy over staffing and protocols. Maya stopped walking. You're offering me Dr. Chen's job? I'm offering you the power to fix everything he broke, Hoskins corrected. You demonstrated tonight what real leadership looks like. You organized chaos into order. You saved lives others had written off. You did in 3 hours what Dr. Chen couldn't do in 3 years, earned the respect and loyalty of everyone who worked with you. We need that. The hospital needs that. Maya looked at her team, at Rodriguez and Chen and Wright and Foster who'd followed her through hell and refused to give up even when she'd given up on herself. She thought about who she'd been trying to be for the last 18 months, small, invisible, safe. And she thought about who she actually was. Wraith, combat medic. Someone who ran toward disaster when everyone else ran away. Thank you for the offer, Mr. Hoskins, Maya said. But my answer is no. I'm not meant to be in a civilian hospital. I'm meant to be here, with my team, doing the work I was trained to do. She could hear the disappointment in his voice. I understand. The offer remains open if you change your mind. Maya ended the call and found Admiral Morrison had arrived in person, his expression grave. Captain Cross, we need to discuss your testimony. The Senate hearing is in 72 hours. There are elements of what you discovered in Helmand that remain classified. You'll need to navigate very carefully between telling the truth and protecting operational security. I'm not protecting anyone who broke the law, Maya said flatly. Classified or not, if someone committed crimes, I'm going to say so. Understood. But there are legitimate security concerns beyond the corruption. Methods, sources, capabilities that can't be disclosed publicly without endangering lives. We need to brief you on the boundaries. Then let's get started, Maya said. The sooner we prepare, the sooner we can make sure Vance and everyone like him face justice. They moved to a secure conference room where briefing materials waited. Files, transcripts, evidence logs. Maya settled into a chair, her injured leg propped on another, and began reading through 18 months of investigation that had happened while she was hiding in plain sight. The scope of the corruption was staggering. Vance hadn't just been trafficking weapons. He'd been systematically diverting military supplies, falsifying inventory records, and coordinating with enemy forces to create demand for black market arms. The operation had generated millions in illegal profits and had directly resulted in American casualties when those weapons were used against U.S. forces. Maya's refusal to follow orders in Helmand had exposed the first thread of the conspiracy. Her intelligence gathering during those 6 hours had provided evidence of coordination between Taliban forces and someone inside the supply chain, and her survival, her stubborn, impossible survival, had kept that evidence alive when Vance had tried to bury it along with her body. How many people died because of this? Maya asked quietly. At least 47 confirmed, Admiral Morrison said. Possibly more that we haven't connected yet. The investigation is ongoing. Maya closed her eyes, feeling the weight of those numbers. 47 service members who died from American weapons that should never have been in enemy hands. 47 families who'd buried their loved ones never knowing that the deaths were preventable, that someone in uniform had actively profited from their loss. I want their names, she said. Every single one. I want to know who they were, who they left behind. When I testify, I want to be able to speak for them. Morrison nodded slowly. I'll have the files prepared. Captain, you should know that your testimony is going to make powerful people very uncomfortable. Vance's network includes senior officers, defense contractors, civilian officials. They're going to fight back hard. Let them, Maya said. I've spent 18 months being quiet. I'm done being quiet. She worked through the files for 3 hours before the pain in her leg became impossible to ignore. Reeves finally intervened, physically taking the documents from her hands. Medical, now. That's not a request. That's... The imaging at Balboa Naval Medical Center showed what Maya had already known. Torn ligaments, fractured bones that had healed poorly during her initial injury and been re-damaged tonight, muscle damage that would require surgery to repair properly. The orthopedic surgeon, a Navy commander named Dr. Patricia Wells, studied the scans with a professional grimace. You should have had surgery on this 18 months ago, she said. Instead, you let it heal wrong and then subjected it to extreme physical stress. You're looking at a minimum 6-month recovery, possibly longer, and there's a chance you'll never regain full function. I don't need full function, Maya said. I need enough to do my job. Your job nearly killed you tonight, Dr. Wells said. Captain, I'm recommending immediate surgery followed by aggressive rehabilitation. You'll be on limited duty for at least 4 months. After the hearing, Maya said, I'll do the surgery after I testify. That's medically inadvisable. I don't care. Maya met the surgeon's eyes. I have 72 hours to prepare testimony that could bring down a corruption network responsible for 47 deaths. I have colleagues who spent 18 months mourning me who deserve answers. I have a chain of command that needs to know I'm not the deserter they thought I was. The surgery can wait. Dr. Wells looked at Admiral Morrison, who'd accompanied Maya to the medical center. He shrugged slightly. The captain has made her priorities clear, Doctor. Do what you can to stabilize her for the next 72 hours. We'll deal with long-term treatment after the hearing. The surgeon wasn't happy, but she prescribed pain medication, fitted Maya with a proper brace, and delivered a stern lecture about the dangers of prioritizing duty over health. Maya listened politely and ignored most of it. She was being discharged when her phone rang again. This time the caller ID showed a name that made her heart stop. James Torres, the petty officer she'd carried out of the collapsed building, the one who'd said she sounded like his sister. Captain Cross? His voice was weak but alert. They told me you came back for me, that you carried me out when the building was falling down. I couldn't leave you behind, Maya said simply. The doctor said I would have died if you'd waited even 2 more minutes. Said the chest wound was worse than they thought, that you kept me alive with field medicine until they could get me to surgery. He paused, and when he spoke again, his voice was thick with emotion. You saved my life. I wanted to say thank you. And I wanted you to know that my sister really is a Navy medic. Her name is Maya, too. She's deployed right now somewhere she can't tell me. But when she gets back, I'm going to tell her about you. About how someone with her name saved mine. Maya felt tears threatening again. You're going to be okay, James. You're going to go home to your family and live a long life. That's all the thanks I need. Still, he said, thank you, Captain, for not giving up on me. The call ended and Maya stood in the hospital corridor, letting the words wash over her. For 18 months, she'd believed that hiding was the same as protecting people. That making herself small would somehow make amends for the choices she'd made in Helmand. But tonight had proven the opposite. Her strength, her skills, her refusal to accept that some people were beyond saving, those were the things that mattered. Those were the reasons 4 people were alive who should have been dead. Those were the reasons a young petty officer named James Torres would get to see his sister again. Rodriguez found her standing there, staring at nothing. You okay? I'm not sure, Maya admitted, but I think maybe I'm starting to be. They returned to the secure facility where Maya's team had set up temporary quarters. The next 72 hours passed in a blur of preparation, testimony review, and coordination with the Senate investigators. Maya learned the names of all 47 service members who'd died from Vance's weapons trafficking. She memorized their faces, their service records, their families. When she testified, she would carry their stories with her. The night before they left for Washington, Maya's team gathered in the common room. They'd spent 3 days together, falling back into the easy camaraderie of people who'd trained and fought and nearly died together. But there was something different now. An acknowledgement that Maya's resurrection had changed all of them, had forced them to confront the grief they'd carried and the guilt they'd felt for failing to save her. I need to apologize, Maya said into the comfortable silence, for letting you think I was dead, for not reaching out, not letting you know I'd survived. You deserved better than that. You were protecting yourself, Chen said. You thought you were doing the right thing. I was being a coward, Maya corrected. I was so afraid of facing the consequences of my choices that I let the people who loved me suffer instead. That's not strength. That's selfishness. Wright leaned forward, his expression serious. Maya, we spent 18 months angry at the people who gave the orders in Helmand. Angry at the system that put you in that impossible situation. We were never angry at you. We knew why you made the choice you did. We would have made the same choice. But you didn't have to, Maya said. I was the officer in command. It was my decision, my responsibility. And we were the team who backed you, Rodriguez said. We held that position for 6 hours because we believed in what you were doing. We extracted those civilians because we knew it was right. You didn't do it alone, Maya. We were all part of it, and we'd do it again. Foster, who'd been quiet through most of the preparation, finally spoke. The memorial service was the hardest day of my life. Knowing you were gone, knowing we'd never get to tell you how much you meant to us. But you're here now. You're alive. And tomorrow we get to tell the truth about what happened, together. That's all I've wanted for 18 months. Maya looked at each of them, at the family she'd tried to leave behind, at the people who'd refused to give up even when she'd given up on herself. Tomorrow I'm going to stand in front of Congress and tell them everything. About Helmand, about the weapons trafficking, about Vance's corruption. And I'm going to ask them to grant clemency for the desertion charges. Not because I think I deserve it, but because I can't do the work that needs to be done from a prison cell. You'll get it, Rodriguez said with certainty. Once they hear what you have to say, once they understand what you discovered and what you sacrificed, they'll have no choice. I hope you're right, Maya said, because if this doesn't work, if they decide to make an example of me anyway, I need to know that you'll continue the fight, that you'll make sure Vance and everyone like him face justice. It won't come to that, Chen said firmly, but Maya saw the uncertainty in their eyes, the knowledge that powerful people protected their own, and that sometimes truth wasn't enough to overcome institutional self-preservation. They were still talking when Hartley appeared in the doorway, his face grim. We found Vance. He was attempting to board a private plane at a regional airport in Montana. He had false identification, 2 million in cryptocurrency, and a list of offshore accounts. He's in custody now. Did he say anything? Maya asked. Only that he wanted to speak to his lawyer. But the evidence we recovered from his safe deposit boxes is damning. Financial records, communication logs, witness lists. He documented everything, probably as insurance against his partners turning on him. Hartley's expression was satisfied. This is going to dismantle the entire network. Everyone he worked with, everyone who profited from his crimes. We're looking at hundreds of arrests over the next few months. Maya felt something settle in her chest. Not peace exactly, but the knowledge that justice was finally possible. When do we leave for Washington? 0600 tomorrow. Military transport, full security escort. The hearing is scheduled for 1400 hours. Hartley handed her a folder. These are your final briefing materials. Review them tonight. And Captain, sleep if you can. Tomorrow is going to be brutal. But sleep didn't come easily. Maya lay in the temporary quarters, her injured leg throbbing despite the medication, her mind racing through everything she'd prepared to say. She thought about Victoria Brennan sitting in a federal holding cell, about Dr. Chen facing disgrace in prison, about Vance's network crumbling as investigators followed every lead. She thought about the 47 service members who'd died from weapons that should never have been in enemy hands, about their families who deserved answers, about the system that had failed them and the people who'd profited from that failure. And she thought about the decision she'd made in Helmand Province, the choice to stay and fight when orders said to run, to save lives when protocol said to preserve the mission. That decision had cost her 18 months of hiding, had nearly destroyed her, had made her a target for people who wanted the truth buried. But it had also saved 43 people, had exposed corruption that needed to be stopped, had proven that sometimes the hardest thing and the right thing were the same thing. Her phone buzzed one last time before she finally drifted into uneasy sleep. The message was from an unknown sender, but the words carried weight. Captain Cross. My name is Elizabeth Martinez. My son David was the Marine you saved with the emergency chest tube. He called me tonight from the hospital and told me about you. About how you didn't hesitate, didn't ask permission, didn't let anyone stop you from saving his life. I wanted you to know that you gave me my son back. Whatever happens tomorrow in Washington, whatever anyone says about your choices or your character, I know the truth. You're a hero. And my family will never forget what you did. Maya read the message 3 times, her vision blurring with tears. Tomorrow she would face Senate investigators, hostile questioning, and the possibility that her career and freedom would both end. But tonight, in this moment, she had the knowledge that she'd made a difference, that her skills, her training, her refusal to accept defeat had given a mother her son back. That was worth fighting for. That was worth whatever came next. She fell asleep with her hand on the patch Rodriguez had returned to her, the ghost emblem with the single word that defined who she'd always been, who she'd tried to stop being, and who she needed to become again. Wraith. When she woke 6 hours later, the first light of dawn was filtering through the window. Her team was already awake, preparing for the trip to Washington, and her phone showed 17 new messages, all from news organizations requesting interviews about the miracle medic who'd emerged from hiding to save lives. The story was already spreading beyond her control. By the time they boarded the military transport, Maya's name and face were on every major news network. The narrative had shifted from deserter to hero, from criminal to whistleblower, from hiding in shame to standing up for truth. But as the aircraft lifted off and headed east toward Washington, Maya knew the real test was still ahead. Because while the media could create narratives and the public could offer support, only Congress could grant the clemency she needed. Only the Senate could decide whether her testimony was valuable enough to outweigh her violations. Only the truth, delivered with absolute conviction in front of people who'd rather keep it buried, could set her free. The Senate Armed Services Committee hearing room was designed to intimidate. Mahogany panels rose to cathedral ceilings. The American flag positioned prominently behind the raised bench, where 15 senators sat in judgment. Gallery seats filled with journalists, military officials, and observers who'd been vetted through multiple security checkpoints. Camera crews positioned at strategic angles to capture every word, every expression, every moment of testimony that would be broadcast live across the nation. Maya sat at the witness table, her injured leg braced beneath formal dress blues that felt foreign after 3 months of civilian scrubs. Her uniform bore the ribbons she'd earned: Navy Cross, Purple Heart, Bronze Star with Valor, decorations that most people spent entire careers hoping to receive once. She wore them not with pride, but with the weight of knowing what each one had cost. Behind her, in the front row of gallery seats, sat her team: Rodriguez, Chen, Wright, Foster, all in dress uniform, all there to support her or testify themselves if called. Their presence was a lifeline, a reminder that she wasn't facing this alone. The committee chairman, Senator Robert Caldwell, was a former Marine who'd served 2 tours in Vietnam and spent 30 years in Washington learning how to project authority without raising his voice. He gavelled the hearing to order, and the room fell silent. "Captain Maya Cross," he began, his voice carrying easily through the chamber. "You were declared killed in action 18 months ago during Operation Sandstorm in Helmand Province, Afghanistan. You were memorialized by your unit, mourned by your family, and written into the record as having died in service to your country. Yet here you sit, very much alive. I think you owe this committee and the American people an explanation." Maya took a breath, her hand steady on the table in front of her. "Senator, I owe everyone an explanation, and I intend to provide one. But first, I need to correct a fundamental misunderstanding. I wasn't killed in action in Helmand Province. I was abandoned there." The room erupted in murmurs. Senator Caldwell's gavel cracked down hard. "Order. Captain Cross, that's a serious accusation. I suggest you be very careful about what you say next." "I'm prepared to be careful, sir. I'm also prepared to tell the truth, regardless of who it implicates or what consequences follow." Maya pulled out a folder Assistant Director Hartley had prepared, containing declassified portions of her after-action report. "On November 12th, 18 months ago, my team was conducting reconnaissance in a village outside Lashkar Gah. Our mission was to gather intelligence on Taliban weapons caches and supply routes. What we discovered was significantly more problematic." She opened the folder, pulled out photographs that had been cleared for public disclosure. "These are American-made weapons, Senator. M4 rifles, grenade launchers, anti-tank missiles, all with serial numbers that trace back to equipment reported as destroyed or decommissioned by U.S. forces. We found them in the hands of Taliban fighters who were using them against our own soldiers." Senator Patricia Moreno, a Democrat from California, leaned forward. "Captain, the committee is aware that weapons sometimes fall into enemy hands through capture, or—" "These weren't captured, Senator," Maya interrupted. "The serial numbers showed they'd been officially destroyed months before we found them. Someone in the supply chain was falsifying destruction records and selling functional weapons to our enemies. And when my team discovered this, when we started documenting everything we found, our extraction orders suddenly changed." She pulled out communication logs, timeline documents, evidence that FBI investigators had spent months compiling. "We were told to extract immediately, to leave the village and abandon the civilians who'd been sheltering us. When I asked why, I was told it was due to changing tactical circumstances. When I requested clarification, I was ordered to stop asking questions and follow directives." Senator Caldwell's expression had shifted from skeptical to focused. "What were these tactical circumstances?" "There weren't any, sir. The real reason for the extraction order was that someone in our command structure realized we'd discovered their weapons trafficking operation. They needed us out of that village before we could gather more evidence. And when I refused to extract without the civilians, when I stayed and documented everything I could, they decided to solve the problem by ensuring none of us made it out alive." The murmurs had become a roar. Caldwell's gavel barely contained it. "Captain, you're accusing your own command of attempted murder?" "I'm accusing Captain Richard Vance, then serving as operations coordinator for our regional command, of deliberately delaying our extraction for 6 hours while Taliban forces surrounded our position. I'm accusing him of hoping we'd all be killed before we could report what we'd found. And I'm accusing him of being part of a weapons trafficking network that has resulted in at least 47 American deaths and millions of dollars in illegal profits." She pulled out the final document, a list of names that made several senators go pale with recognition. "These are the service members who died from American weapons that should never have been in enemy hands. Staff Sergeant Michael Torres, killed by an M4 that was supposedly destroyed. Lieutenant Commander James Walsh, killed by explosives traced back to our own supply depots. Corporal Sarah Chen, no relation to my teammate, killed by a grenade launcher that had Vance's signature on its destruction certificate. Maya's voice cracked slightly on the last name, but she pushed through. 47 people, senators. 47 families who buried their loved ones thinking they died fighting the enemy. They deserved to know the enemy was wearing an American uniform. Senator Caldwell had gone very still. Captain Cross, these are extraordinary allegations. Do you have evidence to support them? The FBI has evidence, sir, financial records showing millions in offshore accounts linked to Vance and his associates. Communication logs proving coordination between Vance and black market weapons dealers. Testimony from multiple conspirators who've agreed to cooperate with investigators. Maya met his eyes directly. And I have my own testimony about what I witnessed in Helmand Province, about the intelligence I gathered during those 6 hours when I should have been extracted, about the decision I made to save 43 civilian lives instead of following orders that would have meant their massacre and the burial of evidence Vance needed destroyed. Senator James Mitchell, a Republican from Texas known for his hardline military stance, spoke up. Captain, regardless of Captain Vance's alleged crimes, you still violated direct orders from a superior officer. You put your team at risk. You made a unilateral decision that could have compromised the entire operation. Those actions constitute insubordination at minimum, possibly desertion under fire. They do, sir, Maya agreed, and I'm prepared to accept the consequences of those actions. But I'm also prepared to argue that the orders themselves were illegal, that they were designed to facilitate criminal activity and cover up corruption, and that my refusal to follow them was not only morally justified but militarily necessary. That's a convenient argument when facing court-martial, Mitchell said sharply. It's the truth, Senator, and if telling the truth costs me my career and my freedom, that's a price I'm willing to pay. Because those 47 service members didn't get a choice about the price they paid. Their families didn't get a choice about losing them. The least I can do is make sure their deaths weren't in vain. The hearing continued for 3 hours. Maya walked the committee through every detail of Operation Sandstorm, the discovery of the weapons cache, the changing orders, the 6-hour firefight, while they waited for extraction that should have come in 40 minutes. She described performing field medicine on wounded children while bullets tore through the walls around them. She explained the intelligence she'd gathered that had later led to the disruption of Taliban operations across the entire province. And she answered every hostile question, every attempt to paint her as a rogue operator or glory seeker or someone trying to justify criminal behavior with heroic narratives. When Senator Mitchell asked why she'd disappeared instead of reporting to authorities after surviving, Maya's answer was simple and devastating. Because I'd spent 4 months recovering in a Pakistani field hospital, sir. 4 months reading news reports about my own death. 4 months realizing that everyone who mattered thought I was gone. And when I finally had the strength to leave, when I finally thought about coming back, I discovered that every piece of intelligence I'd gathered in Helmand had been classified so heavily that even my team couldn't access it. The after-action reports had been sealed, the evidence had been buried, and I realized that someone with significant power wanted Operation Sandstorm forgotten completely. Coming back seemed like walking into a trap designed to silence me permanently. So you hid, Mitchell said. I survived, Senator. There's a difference. When Maya finally finished her testimony, Caldwell called for a 30-minute recess. Maya limped out of the hearing room, her legs screaming from 3 hours of sitting still, and found Hartley waiting with Admiral Morrison. You did well, Hartley said. Better than well. Half the committee looks ready to launch their own investigation into military procurement. And the other half looks ready to charge me with treason, Maya said. The evidence speaks for itself, Morrison said. Vance's arrest and the documents we've recovered make it impossible to dismiss your testimony as fabrication. The committee knows that pursuing charges against you would look like retaliation for whistleblowing. They'd never survive the political backlash. Unless they decide making an example of me is worth the backlash, Maya said quietly. The hearing resumed with a surprise. Senator Moreno requested permission to call additional witnesses. Caldwell granted it, and Maya watched as her entire team was brought forward, each taking the oath and sitting at the witness table where she'd just spent 3 hours defending her choices. Rodriguez testified about the intelligence they'd gathered, the weapons they'd documented. the civilians whose lives had hung in the balance during those 6 hours. Chen described the medical emergencies Maya had handled under fire, the impossible choices made in impossible circumstances. Wright and Foster corroborated every detail of Maya's account, adding their own perspectives on the delayed extraction and the suspicious communications from command. And then Senator Moreno called a witness Maya hadn't expected. Dr. Patricia Wells, the orthopedic surgeon from Balboa Naval Medical Center. Dr. Wells, Moreno said, you've examined Captain Cross's medical records. Can you describe the nature of her injuries? Wells pulled up imaging on screens positioned around the hearing room. Captain Cross suffered catastrophic injuries in Helmand Province, multiple fractures, torn ligaments, severe soft tissue damage. These injuries should have been treated immediately with surgery and extensive rehabilitation. Instead, they were left to heal improperly while she was recovering in a facility that lacked proper orthopedic capability. The pain she's experienced for the last 18 months would be debilitating for most people. Yet she continued working as a nurse, Moreno said, performing physically demanding tasks despite chronic pain. She did. And then, 3 nights ago, she re-injured that leg while performing rescue operations in a collapsing building. The damage is severe enough that she may never regain full mobility without extensive surgery and rehabilitation. Wells looked directly at the senators. Captain Cross has been working through pain that would send most people to disability for 18 months. She's done it without complaint, without seeking treatment, because she was too afraid to access military medical facilities that might reveal her identity. Thank you, Doctor. Moreno turned to address the full committee. I think we need to consider the full context of Captain Cross's actions. She's not a deserter seeking to avoid consequences. She's a wounded warrior who survived catastrophic injuries, discovered massive corruption, and spent 18 months afraid that reporting it would get her killed. The fact that she's sitting here today, that she's willing to testify despite the personal cost, speaks to her character and her commitment to justice. Senator Mitchell wasn't swayed. Sympathetic circumstances don't excuse violations of military law. If we grant clemency every time someone has a compelling story, this isn't just a compelling story, Admiral Morrison interrupted, standing from the gallery. Permission to address the committee, Mr. Chairman? Caldwell looked surprised, but nodded. The committee recognizes Admiral Thomas Morrison, commander of Naval Special Warfare. Morrison walked to the witness table, his presence commanding immediate attention. Senators, I've spent 30 years in special operations. I've seen exceptional soldiers. I've seen heroes. Captain Cross is both. The intelligence she gathered in Helmand Province led directly to the disruption of Taliban operations that have saved countless lives. Her refusal to abandon civilians prevented a massacre that would have destroyed our relationships with tribal leaders throughout the region. And her testimony today has exposed corruption that was costing American lives. And so, he pulled out a folder of his own. These are commendations from every member of Captain Cross's team. They're unanimous in recommending her for the Medal of Honor for her actions in Helmand. I'm adding my own recommendation. What she did wasn't insubordination. It was exactly what we train our special operators to do. Make the hard calls, trust their judgment, save lives even when the orders say otherwise. Admiral, Caldwell said slowly, the Medal of Honor is awarded for actions above and beyond the call of duty. But Captain Cross violated direct orders. How do you reconcile that? The orders were illegal, sir. They were designed to cover up criminal activity and endanger civilians under our protection. Following them would have been the violation. Captain Cross made the right choice. She deserves recognition, not prosecution. The hearing recessed again, this time for 2 hours while the committee deliberated in closed session. Maya waited in a secure room with her team, watching news coverage of the hearing on muted televisions. The commentary was split, some analysts calling her a hero, others questioning whether personal convictions justified military insubordination, everyone agreeing that the weapons trafficking allegations were explosive. Maya's phone buzzed constantly with messages. From Elizabeth Martinez, thanking her again for saving her son. From James Torres, still recovering but wanting her to know he was following the hearing. From Gerald Hoskins at Cascade General, repeating his job offer and adding that the hospital board had voted to name their trauma wing in her honor. And one message from an unknown number that made her hands shake. Captain Cross, my name is Sarah Chen's mother. Not your teammate, the corporal who died from the weapons you discovered. I wanted you to know that we've been fighting for 18 months to understand how our daughter died. The military said it was combat, enemy action, unavoidable. Now we know the truth. Thank you for not letting her death be buried with lies. Thank you for making sure someone is held accountable. Maya showed the message to Rodriguez, who read it and closed his eyes briefly. That's why we're here, he said quietly. That's why all of this matters. Not for us, for them. When the committee reconvened, the tension in the hearing room was palpable. Caldwell gavelled the session to order and looked directly at Maya. Captain Cross, this committee has reviewed your testimony, the supporting evidence, and the recommendations from your chain of command. We've also consulted with the Judge Advocate General's office regarding the legal implications of your actions and the orders you violated. We've reached a decision. Maya stood, her injured leg threatening to buckle, but held steady through sheer will. The committee finds that the orders you received in Helmand Province were issued under false pretenses as part of a criminal conspiracy. Following those orders would have made you complicit in covering up weapons trafficking and would have resulted in the deaths of 43 civilians. Your refusal to comply, while technically insubordinate, was legally and morally justified. Caldwell paused, letting the words sink in. All charges related to desertion, AWOL status, and insubordination are hereby dismissed. Your military record will reflect that you were wounded in action, recovered without military support due to circumstances beyond your control, and returned to duty as soon as reasonably possible. The gallery erupted. Maya felt her knees go weak, Rodriguez's hand on her shoulder the only thing keeping her upright. Furthermore, Caldwell continued, this committee is recommending that you be reinstated to active duty with full back pay for the 18 months you were listed as KIA. We're also recommending that you receive the Distinguished Service Medal for the intelligence you gathered in Helmand Province, which has directly contributed to ongoing operations against enemy forces. Senator Moreno added, Captain Cross, I want to personally apologize on behalf of the military and this government for what you endured. You were put in an impossible situation by people who betrayed their oaths and their country. You made the right choice at tremendous personal cost. We should have protected you better. We should have listened sooner. Maya found her voice, though it came out rougher than intended. Thank you, Senator. But I didn't do this for recognition or vindication. I did it because it was right, and because the people who died deserved someone to stand up and tell the truth about how and why. Which brings us to our final matter, Caldwell said. Captain Vance and 17 co-conspirators are currently in federal custody facing charges of weapons trafficking, corruption, conspiracy, and multiple counts of negligent homicide. This committee is referring all evidence to the Department of Justice with a recommendation for maximum prosecution. We're also launching a comprehensive investigation into military procurement and supply chain oversight to prevent this from happening again. He looked around the hearing room at the cameras and journalists and military officials. Let me be absolutely clear to everyone watching. What happened to Captain Cross, what she discovered, what she endured, what she was forced to sacrifice, this represents a catastrophic failure of leadership and oversight. We failed the 47 service members who died. We failed their families. We failed Captain Cross and her team. Those failures end today. This committee will not rest until every person involved in this conspiracy faces justice, and until we've implemented reforms that make this kind of corruption impossible. The hearing adjourned to thunderous applause from the gallery. Maya was immediately surrounded by her team, all of them talking at once, embracing her, celebrating a victory that had seemed impossible just days ago. Admiral Morrison made his way through the crowd. Captain, I have new orders for you. Report to Naval Special Warfare Command next week. We're creating a new position, Director of Combat Medical Training. You'll be responsible for developing curriculum, selecting candidates, and ensuring that the next generation of combat medics are trained to your standard. Full autonomy, significant budget, direct line to my office. Maya stared at him. Sir, I'm not sure I'm qualified to... You performed emergency surgery in a civilian ER when everyone else froze. You walked into a collapsing building and carried out wounded while the structure fell around you. You testified in front of Congress and helped expose corruption that's existed for years. You're the most qualified person I know. Morrison's expression softened slightly. It's not a request, Captain. It's an order. We need you. The teams need you. And frankly, you need something to do besides hiding in civilian hospitals where people don't appreciate what you're capable of. Before Maya could respond, Assistant Director Hartley appeared. Captain Cross, I wanted to inform you that Victoria Brennan and her co-conspirators have all been formally charged with espionage, conspiracy, and attempted murder. Brennan is looking at life in federal prison without possibility of parole. Dr. Chen received a reduced sentence in exchange for his cooperation, 15 years, eligible for parole in 10. He's been stripped of his medical license permanently. And Cascade General? Maya asked. Under new management. Gerald Hoskins resigned last night, though he's not facing criminal charges since he cooperated with the investigation. The hospital board has appointed an interim CEO and is conducting a full review of hiring and oversight practices. Hartley smiled slightly. They're also dealing with a public relations nightmare since every news outlet in the country is running stories about how they employed and mistreated a decorated combat medic for 3 months without realizing it. Good, Maya said with feeling. Maybe they'll think twice before dismissing someone based on prejudice and ego. The next hours passed in a blur of debriefings, media requests that Maya's team helped her politely decline, and conversations with officials who'd suddenly discovered her value now that her vindication was public. By the time they made it back to their hotel, Maya was exhausted in ways that had nothing to do with her injured leg. Rodriguez ordered food and made sure Maya elevated her leg while they waited. The team gathered in her suite, too keyed up from the day's events to separate yet. So, Chen said, breaking the comfortable silence. Director of Combat Medical Training. That's a pretty significant promotion. It's terrifying, Maya admitted. I've spent 18 months trying to be invisible. Now I'm supposed to lead an entire program? You've been leading since Helmand, Wright said. You just convinced yourself you weren't. But everyone who served with you, everyone who watched you work, we knew. You were always supposed to be in command. Besides, Foster added with a grin, you already proved you can organize chaos into order and make people listen even when they don't want to. That's literally the job description. Maya's phone buzzed again. This time it was a video message from James Torres, propped up in his hospital bed, but looking significantly better than the last time she'd seen him. Captain Cross, I just watched your testimony. My sister texted me from her deployment. She saw it too. She said to tell you that any medic named Maya is automatically her favorite person, and she'd be honored to work with you if she ever gets the chance. I told her I'd put in a good word. Thanks again for everything. You're a hero, ma'am. Maya watched the video twice, then looked at her team. A hero? People keep calling me that, but I don't feel like a hero. I feel like someone who just did what needed to be done and got lucky enough to survive the consequences. That's exactly what a hero is, Rodriguez said. Someone who does the right thing without thinking about whether they'll be rewarded or punished. Someone who sees what needs to happen and makes it happen regardless of personal cost. You've been doing that your whole career, Maya. The only difference now is that people finally recognize it. A knock on the door interrupted the moment. Maya opened it to find a courier with a large envelope marked with official seals. She signed for it, opened it carefully, and found herself looking at her new orders. Official reinstatement to active duty, assignment to Naval Special Warfare Command, effective immediately following 30 days of medical leave for surgery and rehabilitation. And beneath the orders, a personal note in Admiral Morrison's handwriting. Captain Cross, the Medal of Honor recommendation is moving forward. Your team's testimony was compelling, and the intelligence you gathered has been deemed critical to national security. The ceremony will likely be in 6 months, after you've completed your medical treatment. Until then, focus on healing. You've earned it. TM. Maya showed the note to her team, watching their expression shift from surprise to pride to something that looked like vindication. They're really doing it, Chen whispered. They're giving you the recognition you deserved all along. They're giving us recognition, Maya corrected. None of this happens without all of you. Without Rodriguez spending his own money to keep searching when everyone said I was dead. Without you flying to Pakistan to look for traces of me. Without Wright and Foster refusing to let the after-action reports be buried. We did this together. And we'll be there when they pin that medal on you, Rodriguez said firmly. Front row, dress blues, probably crying like children because we're terrible at controlling our emotions. They talked late into the night, processing everything that had happened, planning for the future that suddenly seemed possible instead of foreclosed. When the team finally left to get some sleep, Maya stood at the window of her hotel room, looking out over Washington, D.C., the monuments lit against the night sky. Her phone buzzed one final time. The message was from an unknown number, but the words made her smile. "Captain Cross, this is Elizabeth Martinez again. I just wanted you to know that the news coverage of your hearing reached my husband David in his unit overseas. He's been telling everyone about the combat medic who saved his life in the Coronado building collapse. Now they're all telling him he was saved by a Medal of Honor recipient. He's very proud to be alive because of you. We all are. Thank you for being the kind of person who runs toward danger when everyone else runs away. The world needs more people like you." Maya saved the message, added it to the collection of reminders about why the last 3 days of pain and exposure and testimony had been worth it. Then she pulled out her laptop and started drafting a curriculum outline for the combat medical training program she'd been ordered to create. She worked through the night, her injured leg propped up, her mind finally clear of the fog that had clouded it for 18 months. Every lesson she outlined was informed by experience, what she'd learned in Helmand, what she'd done at Cascade General, what she'd proven in the collapsing building at Coronado. She wrote protocols for mass casualty scenarios, decision-making frameworks for impossible situations, techniques for performing emergency medicine under fire. And she wrote a section on ethics and moral courage, about the responsibility that came with medical training, about the duty to save lives even when orders or politics or convenience suggested otherwise. By the time dawn broke over Washington, Maya had completed a draft that was 30 pages long and represented everything she'd learned through blood and trauma and survival. She sent it to Admiral Morrison with a simple note. "First draft of the curriculum. Looking forward to building something that matters." His response came within minutes. "This is exactly what we need. Welcome back to the fight, Captain." Maya spent the required 30 days on medical leave, undergoing surgery to repair her leg and beginning the long process of rehabilitation. Dr. Wells was cautiously optimistic about full recovery, though she warned it would take months of dedicated physical therapy and that Maya needed to actually follow medical advice instead of pushing through pain and making everything worse. "I'm learning," Maya said during one of her follow-up appointments. "Slowly, very slowly." "Good," Wells said, "because I didn't put your leg back together just to watch you destroy it again performing rescue operations in collapsing buildings." The surgery was successful, the rehabilitation brutal but effective. Maya worked with physical therapists who understood military requirements and didn't let her quit when the exercises became agonizing. Rodriguez showed up for every session, pushing her when she needed it and backing off when she needed space. "You carried wounded people out of a burning building," he said during one particularly difficult session. "You can handle some resistance bands and balance exercises." "The building was easier," Maya muttered, but she completed the exercises. 6 weeks after the Senate hearing, Maya reported to Naval Special Warfare Command in her dress blues, her legs still braced but functional, her stride almost normal again. Admiral Morrison met her personally, walked her through the facility where she'd be building her program, introduced her to the staff she'd be working with. "You have carte blanche," he said. "Budget, personnel, equipment, whatever you need to create the best combat medical training in the world. Your only constraint is that we want the first class graduated within 12 months. "That's aggressive," Maya said. "You're aggressive," Morrison countered. "I've seen your curriculum. I've read the testimonials from people you've saved. If anyone can do this in 12 months, it's you." The program took shape over the following months. Maya recruited instructors from across special operations, selected candidates who showed not just medical skill, but the judgment and courage to use it under pressure. She designed training scenarios that pushed people to their limits and then pushed further, teaching them to make life or death decisions when there were no good options and failure meant people died. She thought about Helmand constantly, about the choices she'd made, the lives she'd saved, the intelligence she'd gathered that had exposed corruption and saved countless others. That experience informed every aspect of the curriculum, every scenario she designed, every standard she set. And when students complained about the difficulty, about the impossible situations they were being put in, Maya's response was simple. The real world doesn't care about your comfort level. The real world puts you in buildings that are collapsing, civilian hospitals where you're dismissed and underestimated, combat zones where your extraction is delayed for 6 hours. Either you learn to handle it here, where failure is educational, or you learn in the field where failure is fatal. The first class of students feared her and respected her in equal measure. They called her Wraith, the legend who'd come back from the dead to teach them how to save lives under impossible conditions. 3 months into the program, Maya received word that the Medal of Honor ceremony had been scheduled. She'd be recognized at the White House in a formal event that would include her team, military leadership, and family members of the 47 service members whose deaths had been linked to Vance's corruption. The night before the ceremony, Maya's team gathered again at a restaurant near the base. They'd done this monthly since her reinstatement, making time to maintain the bonds that had survived death and separation and 18 months of grief. "Nervous about tomorrow?" Chen asked. "Terrified," Maya admitted. "I'm going to be standing in front of the president receiving the highest military honor while people watch and judge whether I deserve it." "You deserve it," Foster said immediately. "Stop questioning that." "I question everything," Maya said. "It's how I've survived this long." Rodriguez raised his glass. "To questioning everything except the things that matter, like the fact that you saved 43 civilians, exposed massive corruption, and inspired an entire generation of combat medics. Those are facts. Everything else is just noise." They clinked glasses, and Maya felt the familiar warmth of being surrounded by people who knew her completely. The good, the bad, the moments of brilliance, and the times she'd nearly broken. They knew all of it and valued her anyway. The Medal of Honor ceremony was everything Maya had feared, and more. Standing in the East Room of the White House, surrounded by military leadership and dignitaries, listening to the president recount her actions in Helmand Province while her team watched from the front row, it felt surreal and overwhelming and completely undeserved. But when the president placed the medal around her neck and stepped back, when the room erupted in applause, Maya looked at the faces watching her. She saw Elizabeth Martinez, David's mother, crying openly. She saw Admiral Morrison standing at attention with pride written across his face. She saw her team, all of them in dress blues, all of them fighting back tears. And she saw, seated in a place of honor, the family members of Corporal Sarah Chen and Staff Sergeant Michael Torres and Lieutenant Commander James Walsh, people who'd lost loved ones to corruption and had spent months demanding answers that finally, belatedly, had arrived. The president leaned in, his voice low enough that only Maya could hear. "Captain Cross, the courage you showed wasn't just in combat, it was in coming back, in testifying, in refusing to let the truth be buried. That's the kind of leadership this country needs. Don't ever doubt that you earned this." Maya managed to keep her composure through the rest of the ceremony, through the reception that followed, through the endless photographs and handshakes and conversations with people who wanted to thank her or tell her their own stories of military service. But when she finally had a quiet moment alone with her team in a side room, when the formality dropped away and they were just soldiers again, Maya let the tears come. "I keep thinking about the people who didn't make it," she said. "The 47 who died because Vance put profit over duty. They should be here. They should be getting recognized, not me." "You're being recognized for them," Rodriguez said gently. "Every time someone sees that medal, every time they ask about it, you get to tell them the truth. About Helmand, about the corruption, about the price that was paid. You're their voice now, Maya. That's the real honor." The months that followed were a blur of activity. Maya's combat medical training program graduated its first class with commendations from across the special operations community. Students who'd feared her during training sought her out afterward to thank her for pushing them, for preparing them, for teaching them that impossible situations required impossible determination. The investigations into military procurement corruption continued to expand, each new arrest and indictment vindicating Maya's decision to testify. Vance and his co-conspirators were convicted on all counts, facing sentences that would keep them in federal prison for the rest of their lives. Victoria Brennan received life without parole for espionage and attempted murder. And Cascade General Hospital, under new leadership, became a model for how civilian facilities should partner with military medical programs. They dedicated their trauma wing to Maya's honor, implemented new protocols based on her recommendations, and created a scholarship program for nurses showing exceptional skill and courage in crisis situations. Gerald Hoskins sent Maya a personal letter apologizing for his failures and thanking her for exposing problems he should have seen. She never responded, but she kept the letter as a reminder that even people who failed could acknowledge their mistakes and try to do better. 1 year after the Senate hearing, Maya stood in front of her second class of combat medical students delivering the opening lecture that had become her signature. "You're here because you want to save lives," she began, her voice carrying across the training room. "But wanting isn't enough. Caring isn't enough. You need skill and judgment and the courage to act when everyone else is frozen. You need the ability to look at an impossible situation and find the possible solution. You need to be willing to carry wounded out of collapsing buildings, to perform emergency surgery in civilian ERs when doctors freeze, to stand up and tell the truth even when powerful people want you silent." She paused, meeting the eyes of students who'd heard the stories but didn't yet understand what they meant. Some of you will face situations where the right choice and the easy choice are different. Where following orders means people die. Where staying silent means corruption continues. In those moments, you'll have to decide what kind of medic you want to be. What kind of person? Maya gestured to the Medal of Honor displayed in a case at the front of the room, not to glorify herself, but to remind students what the stakes were, what the standard was. "I made my choice in a village in Afghanistan 18 months ago. I chose to save lives over following orders. I chose truth over convenience, and I paid for those choices with 18 months of hiding, injury, and fear. But I'd make the same choice again, because those 43 civilians lived, because the corruption was exposed, because the truth mattered more than my comfort." She let that sink in, then smiled slightly. "Now let's get to work. You've got a lot to learn, and I don't accept excuses or failure. Welcome to combat medical training. You're going to hate me by the end of this week, but you'll thank me when you're saving lives in the field." The students laughed nervously, not yet understanding how accurate that prediction was. After class, Maya returned to her office to find Admiral Morrison waiting with news. "Captain Cross, I wanted to inform you personally that we've received requests from 3 allied nations asking if you'd be willing to help develop their combat medical programs. The French, Germans, and Israelis are all interested in adopting your curriculum." "Sir, I barely have time to run our own program." "I'm not asking you to run theirs," Morrison interrupted. "I'm asking if you'd be willing to train their instructors, share your curriculum, help them build programs based on your model. It would mean international travel, collaboration with foreign military services, and significant influence over how allied forces approach combat medicine." Maya considered the offer, thinking about the reach it would give her, the lives that could be saved if her approach was adopted more broadly. "What about my students here?" "We'll adjust schedules, bring in additional instructors, make it work." Morrison leaned forward. "Maya, what you're building here is revolutionary. It's changing how we think about combat medical training across the entire special operations community. Now we have the chance to export that excellence, to raise the standard globally. I think you should take it." "Then I will," Maya said. "On one condition. Any program that uses my curriculum has to include the ethics component, the section on moral courage and duty to preserve life over following illegal orders. That's non-negotiable." "Agreed," Morrison said immediately. "In fact, that's the section they're most interested in. Apparently word has gotten around about a combat medic who refused to abandon civilians and ended up exposing massive corruption. People want to know how to train that kind of judgment and courage." "You can't train courage," Maya said, "but you can train people to recognize when courage is required and give them the tools to act on it. That's all I'm doing." Morrison smiled. "That's everything, Captain, and it's exactly what we need." 6 months later, Maya stood in front of an international audience of military medical personnel from 15 countries, delivering a keynote address at a combat medicine conference in Geneva. She talked about Helmand, about the decisions she'd made and the consequences she'd faced. She talked about the importance of preserving civilian life even in combat zones, about the duty to question orders that seemed designed to cover up rather than accomplish mission objectives. And she talked about the quiet nurse at Cascade General who'd spent 3 months being dismissed and underestimated, about how that experience had taught her that strength wasn't always loud or obvious, that sometimes the most powerful thing you could do was survive with your integrity intact while waiting for the moment to act. When she finished, the applause was sustained and genuine. Military officers from countries that rarely agreed on anything found common ground in Maya's message about medical ethics, moral courage, and the responsibility to preserve life. After the conference, Maya received a message that made her smile. It was from James Torres, fully recovered now and back on active duty. "Captain Cross, remember my sister I told you about? The Navy medic named Maya? She just got accepted into your next training class. She's terrified and excited and wants you to know that she's been preparing for this since she watched your Senate testimony. Thanks for inspiring her, and thanks for showing everyone what medics can do when we're trained right and trusted to make the hard calls." James. Maya forwarded the message to Rodriguez with a simple note. "We're making a difference." His response? "We always were. People are just finally paying attention." 2 years after the Senate hearing, Maya stood on the stage at the Naval Special Warfare Command graduation ceremony watching her 4th class of combat medics receive their certifications. These weren't just students anymore. They were people she'd trained, pushed, challenged, and prepared for the realities of combat medicine. One of them was Maya Torres, James's sister, who'd proven to be one of the best students in her class. She'd earned the top honors for both technical skill and tactical judgment, demonstrating exactly the kind of excellence that the program was designed to develop. As Maya Torres crossed the stage to receive her certification, the elder Maya felt something settle in her chest, a sense of purpose fulfilled, of circles completed, of legacy building beyond her own actions. After the ceremony, the younger Maya approached her, eyes bright with accomplishment and gratitude. "Captain Cross, I wanted to thank you for everything you've taught me, for showing me what's possible when you refuse to accept that something can't be done, for being the kind of medic I want to be." "You're going to be better than I ever was," Maya told her, "because you're learning from my mistakes without having to make them yourself. That's how progress happens." "Oh, will you keep teaching?" the younger Maya asked. "Will you stay in the program?" Maya looked around at the graduates, at the families celebrating, at the instructors who'd helped build something that mattered. "As long as they'll have me. This is where I belong. Not hiding in civilian hospitals, not running from consequences. Here, training the next generation to be better than we were." That evening, Maya's team gathered one final time at Rodriguez's house for a barbecue. They'd done this regularly over the 2 years since the hearing, maintaining the bonds that had survived everything the military and fate had thrown at them. "So," Chen said, raising a beer, 2 years ago we thought Maya was dead. Now she's training combat medics for half the world's militaries and getting invited to speak at international conferences. How does it feel to be famous?" "Exhausting," Maya said honestly. "And weird. And occasionally terrifying when I realize how many people are counting on me to not screw this up." "You won't," Wright said with certainty, "because screwing up would mean letting down your students, and we all know you'd walk through fire before you'd let that happen." Maya's phone buzzed with an email notification. She glanced at it, then smiled and showed it to Rodriguez. "The French military just formally adopted our curriculum. They're calling it the Cross Protocol for Combat Medical Training. They named it after you," Rodriguez said, grinning. "That's pretty amazing." "They named it after what we built together," Maya corrected. "After everything we learned in Helmand and everything we've proven since. This isn't just my legacy, it's ours." "Then here's to our legacy," Rodriguez said, raising his glass. "To refusing to accept impossible. To saving lives even when protocols say otherwise. To the quiet strength that everyone underestimates until it's the only thing standing between them and disaster." They drank to that. To friendship that had survived death and resurrection. To purpose that had emerged from trauma. To the knowledge that they'd made a difference that would outlast them all. Later, as the evening wound down and people started heading home, Rodriguez pulled Maya aside. "You doing okay? Really okay? Not just the public face you show everyone else?" Maya considered the question honestly. "I'm better than I've been in years. The leg is almost fully healed. The program is thriving. I wake up every morning knowing exactly what I'm supposed to be doing. For someone who spent 18 months lost and hiding, that's pretty remarkable. You were never really lost, Rodriguez said. You were just waiting for the right moment to be found, for the situation that would force you to stop hiding and start fighting. Turns out a mass casualty event and a collapsing building were exactly what you needed. Weird way to find yourself, Maya said. You're a weird person, Rodriguez countered. Makes sense your path would be unusual. Maya laughed, feeling lighter than she had in years. The weight of secrets and shame and fear that had defined her for 18 months was gone, replaced by purpose and community and the knowledge that she'd not only survived but thrived. She'd been the quiet nurse everyone ignored until a helicopter came for her. She'd been the disgraced combat medic hiding from consequences. She'd been the broken warrior too afraid to ask for help. But now she was Captain Maya Cross, Medal of Honor recipient, Director of Combat Medical Training, someone who'd turned personal trauma into institutional change, someone who'd refused to let corruption and dismissal and 18 months of hiding define her, someone who'd proven that the strongest thing you could do was survive with your integrity intact and then use that survival to build something that mattered. As she drove home that night, her leg barely aching for the first time in 2 years, Maya thought about all the paths her life could have taken. She could have stayed hidden as Maya Torres, could have accepted Hoskins' job offer and remained in the civilian world, could have let the fear and shame consume her until there was nothing left. Instead, she'd walked into a collapsing building, testified in front of Congress, and built a training program that was changing how military medicine was practiced around the world. Her phone buzzed one last time, a message from Admiral Morrison. Captain Cross, the Secretary of Defense wants to meet with you next week. Something about expanding your role to cover all military medical training, not just special operations. Interested? Maya smiled, typed a response. Always interested in opportunities to save more lives and raise standards. Send me the details. She'd spent 18 months being quiet, being dismissed, being small. She was done being quiet, and the world was better for it.